All right, and we're in. How you doing? Welcome to the studio.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's been a while that I've been expecting to come on, and yeah, it's finally happening.
We finally made it. No, I had a great conversation with Joel, and I thought, like, he introduced you and your work as well, the acting as well as the activism and stuff like that. And I just thought you've had such a unique story and unique history, and then you're on doing amazing things again, and it's wonderful to kind of chat and get your perspective of what life is like in this town.
Oh my gosh, in Los Angeles. Jeez.
It's like it changes every couple months, doesn't it? Like it's such a fast moving city, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
When I moved here, it was really boring.
Really?
Really boring. Yeah. Because I came from New York City.
Yeah.
So everything seemed really boring. But what I realized is that it wasn't boring. It was just hard to find your way in.
Mhm.
Because it's a driving city, and I wasn't used to that. I didn't even know how to drive it.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how many people, like, come out to LA and are struck by the fact that you actually have to drive everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so exhausting, isn't it?
I don't like it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not the greatest driver. I mean, I'm better now, but initially I was really quite bad.
Mhm.
I think I had 11 accidents in my first year driving,
Oh, shit.
mostly with non-moving objects, so, people were safe, but
Yeah.
not so much other cars or poles or sidewalks.
I remember so I lived in Shanghai, China for 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I remember at the beginning, I was taking taxis around because I had to, and taxis were quite cheap back then, so it wasn't a big deal. Um But the city was like had 30 million people in it, and the taxi drivers and their quality and stuff like that was pretty bad. So when I had enough money to buy a car, I bought a car thinking I could just drive around everywhere and I wouldn't have to deal with the taxi drivers. But then the city got so big and the congestion got so bad that driving was a miserable experience. So then this was at a time when Uber came back into China, and they also have this other company called Didi Kuaidi, and they kind of like combine their businesses. So now the ride sharing was amazing in China. And then I gave up my car and then I went back to doing ride sharing because driving in a city of like 30 million was insane. But here, it's such a spread out city. Like you don't even, it's just as bad to ride share an hour as it is to sit in traffic for an hour. It's terrible.
They didn't have, like, buses and trains and
Packed.
subways? Oh, packed.
Yeah, so like in China, it was the opposite. Like in the United States, where you might have an above ground train that's like half empty or whatever. Like you have 30 million Chinese people going to work every day. Like the tube, like the subway was packed, the buses were all packed. Like getting in and out of like public transport was absolutely miserable.
Oh,
Yeah,
like India.
like or Japan, like where you see those people with the white
Shoving.
gloves, like stuffing everyone into the cars.
Yeah. I did probably turn around and whack one of them into trying to shove me in a
Exactly.
box.
So what was it like growing up in New York City?
Actually, I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela.
Okay.
My family moved there when I was 4 years old, and, so I didn't grow up in New York City, but I came back to New York City when I was 14,
Mhm.
which is a really weird time to come back after being somewhere kind of I don't know if you've watched Bridgerton, but
I haven't. I haven't.
Oh.
Walk me through that.
Well, it's the, London, Ton, which is kind of the royal court of London in the early 1800s, and that's what Venezuela was kind of like at that time. Can you imagine? And now they're, like, talking about gangs and, all the terrible Venezuelans, as I say to Joel, Venezuelans, from what I know, are kind of like the valley girls of the Latin world. They're super chill, they like to go to the beach, they like they're very not like Tren de Aragua, like, whatever they're saying now, it just kinda cracks me up because it doesn't have any bearing in reality.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so being in Venezuela, growing up there was like, I went to British schools, and then we had the club after school where people would play bridge, and it was a very innocent childhood, I guess you would say. Innocent and privileged childhood.
Yeah.
And then come back to Brooklyn, New York City, uh, at pubescence, and that was a bit of a culture shock, to say the least.
It's crazy how much Venezuela has changed, just like even if it hasn't changed that much on the ground, how much the public perception of Venezuela has changed in like the last 30 or 40 years, right? Because like if it went from this like ideal, innocent place where you could grow up and go to British international schools and you had oil expats there living nice lives with their families and everything like that. And now all you hear about is like narco problems, gang problems, inflation problems, exporting crime. Like, I don't know how much of that's true because I've never been to the country, but it's crazy how that perception is totally flipped on its head.
It's shocking.
Yeah.
Like, when I was growing up, Colombia was like the bad sister, you know?
Right, right. Pablo.
Yeah, and Venezuela was like the, nice, well-behaved one.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, well, we don't have to get into like US imperialism, but I think that had
That's for another podcast too.
had a profound effect on Venezuela and how people felt about having their oil essentially stolen by the Brits, the Dutch, and the Americans for many, many, many decades until finally, the people said, you know what? This is our natural resource. How come we don't get to profit from it?
Right.
And then it went downhill from there
Yeah.
because the United States doesn't like to give back stuff they've stolen.
No, and then of course you have to rely on local politicians to do the right thing when they have huge amounts of money on hand, and you have to make sure that they're, honorable, they're not embezzling, they're not stealing, they're not giving contracts to friends and family.
Dear God. I mean, politicians and those adjectives kind of go together. I just
So
don't care what country you're from. I don't know about Canada.
oh, it's just as bad. Just I'll just at a smaller scale, yeah.
Really? 'Cause they
Everywhere.
seem so proper.
Well, that's why Canada doesn't want to be like a 51st state. This is probably going to get me canceled. But obviously Canada has our own identity. Canadians have their own identity, and we're still part of the British Commonwealth. So the King of England is officially still our head of state,
Yeah.
and our prime minister reports to them. That's like kind of officially how it's supposed to be. But all of our politicians and longstanding politicians are doing all of the same things that the American politicians are doing. They all have their fiefdoms. They all have their friends and family and businesses. They're all doing it's just at a way smaller scale. Like we just don't the Canadian government doesn't spend $5 trillion a year,
Right.
and borrow half of it. That we spend a little less, a lot less, and
That's disappointing.
that we're not as corrupt.
That apparently you are as corrupt.
I think
It's just
every
a
country
different
is.
scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think every country is like
Yeah.
it's just the same way like like these royal families in the Middle East. Like I lived in Dubai for a few years, and that's the first thing they do is they just manage like the entire economy, right? Like, hey, cousin number 1, you're in banking and finance. Cousin number 2, you're in electricity production and the electrical grid. Cousin number 3, you're on telecoms. Cousin number 4, you're doing ports and trading. Customs. Number 5, you're doing oil and gas and petrol. Like, they just split it up amongst themselves, and then it's a closed group. And these politicians and their interests, like especially in a democracy, like the exact same thing is happening. It's just every couple of years it rotates, and new people come in, couple people get pushed out, so there's more infighting. Whereas these royal families, sometimes they stay in power for generations, right? And you can imagine how much money they amass illegitimately.
God, it's so sickening. It just really makes you sad about the human nature, human beings. It's very upsetting. I don't believe in any of that.
No.
And no, I don't. I don't agree with any of it. I don't like it. I don't think that we have to be like that.
Mm.
Maybe it's naive or utopian, but honestly, I think that we should be able to get over our obsession with um, capital and power.
Yeah.
If we're going to survive, if the planet is going to continue to exist.
Right.
Otherwise, we should just sort of eradicate the species once and for all and leave the earth to be appreciated by animals and plants and other life forms that are less corrupted.
Which could happen at any moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it probably will.
Yeah. Another earthquake or volcano eruption or meteor impact. And again, our whole way of life is over, right? Yeah. Well, great start to the podcast. No.
Well, I think times are such that that big questions must be addressed. That, the time for discussing, you know, political small talk or so on is just really long past. And that's to get to it. That's why I'm focused on women in particular, not because we're so, immune, but generally speaking, there are qualities that women possess that make it more plausible that we could escape, um, species eradication.
Hmm.
In theory, that's my theory.
Hmm. And that was part of why you took 10 years off of acting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to work up to that because that's very interesting. So, okay, so you go back to Brooklyn from Venezuela at 14, on that verge of adolescence. And what was that like coming back from what sounded like a walled garden of aristocratic or expat Venezuela
Yeah.
to Brooklyn, New York, the chaos of a city that is untamed?
It was, quite terrifying. I didn't know what was going on. Actually didn't even know how babies were made at that point.
Oh,
Yeah, so I was very insulated. I was like one of those mugs, very, very insulated. I had no idea what was going on. And my parents actually put me in a private school in Brooklyn Heights, which is a very, very good private school. A lot of great people have come out of there, but it wasn't great for me because I was trying to fit in. And so a lot of the kids were very jaded and very cynical because they were so I guess the elite of New York City, as distinct from the elite of Venezuela, is that they were more, I don't know how to say it. They were fast. They had chauffeurs, they had grams of cocaine, they had subscriptions to Vogue, they went out clubbing all night. So I really didn't know what was going on, but I could tell that there were people that were the cool ones. And I was like, I'm gonna be damned if I'm like the not cool one.
right.
'Cause I was already very uncool in Venezuela. And I was like, "No, this cannot continue.
Mhm.
I'm going to rewrite my person. I'm going to be popular
Somehow.
somehow,
Yeah.
some way." And it looks like the best way is sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Well, that's what all the advertisements say.
And that's what all the kids were doing.
Right.
So that's the way I went, and I went very fast, and my parents didn't didn't know what was going on, but they did get it was a school that didn't give out report cards because everybody was apparently so brilliant. They had to take IQ tests to get in, so once you're in, didn't get a report card, you just got a report.
Mhm.
In fact, my geometry teacher said, "I'm sure Kamala's a very intelligent girl. I've never seen her."
Oh,
Oh.
wow.
So needless to say, my parents were like, "Oh, no,
Mhm.
we're not paying, for this." And they pulled me out after a year in private school and put me directly into a Brooklyn inner city public school, 3 grades, 5,000 kids,
Oh, wow.
armed guards, bells, the whole thing. Like, I was scared straight for sure.
And your parents came with you from Venezuela to Brooklyn during that time, like, you weren't alone or with other
Oh, no,
family?
no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. I
Yeah.
convinced them all to move back to the States because I was already acting in Venezuela
Mhm.
and I wanted to get on with it, And I did start acting immediately as soon as I got to New York.
Wow, that's amazing. So what was it like going from Brooklyn Heights private school to inner city Brooklyn school? Like, what was that transition like?
That was even more terrifying. So it was really like, like whiplash, because what was cool in an elite private school is not what's cool in Flatbush, Brooklyn.
Mhm.
So then I had to sort of reinvent myself again to not get my ass handed to me.
Mhm.
I really had to like step it up and be more like Ryan Pyle.
And these are more like formative years too. You're like 14, 15, 16. You're
Yeah.
already questioning everything. Your hormones are all over the place. You don't know what's going on and you have to deal with these kinds of changes.
It was nuts. And I just became like like really quite, well, I think actually, what's the word, became not schizophrenic, but I had 2 things going on. One was I have to be cool and fit in this environment, which is extremely aggressive and somewhat criminal from what I could tell.
Mhm.
And then on the other hand, I was like a really good student and I couldn't help needing to be the best student.
Mhm.
So those things couldn't coexist publicly. So that began my long career of hiding my intellectual pursuits with juvenile delinquency.
Oh, wow. It sounds like an episode of Severance.
Ah.
Did you watch that on Apple?
Yes,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course. A dear friend of mine plays Harmony Cobell.
Oh, she's fantastic. Yeah.
She's so good.
Yeah. But that's a that kind of, you kind of like had to split up your life between like a right brain version and a left brain version.
That's right.
And you had to like switch them on and off at
Yeah,
will.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that just continued, you know. So I was in school in Brooklyn for 2 years,
Mhm.
and then I went back. Then I got in early action to Yale University, which is like coming full circle back to the secret walled garden.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, and so there, by the time I got there, I was a full-on punk rocker, juvenile delinquent, heavy, marijuana user, heavy partier, and then walking into the Pearls and the, you know, Buffy and Miffy and, the sailing crowd, you can imagine. So it was a very, intense period of my life.
Yeah, Yale and Princeton are very cliquey like that.
Very clicky,
Yeah.
very clicky.
I don't have too much experience, but I've heard stories, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the acting like? So you moved back to New York at 14. You want to get into acting, you want to be more professional, you think New York is the place to go. What was, did the private school that you went to and then eventually the public school you went to, did they have like any resources like theater or any great acting coaches that you were able to work with, or were you working as an actor like entirely outside of your education system, like going to auditions and having your parents drive you around all the time? Like what was that like?
No, basically, I got to New York and I did my own research and I went out and got myself an agent and I got myself headshots. And
At 14?
yeah, and I got myself on Sesame Street. My first audition I booked, it was a regular role on Sesame Street. So I did that while I was still in school. Um, Neither school, nobody was doing that, and I started studying at Herbert Berghoff Studios in the Village. Yeah, it was completely separate again, 2 different lives altogether.
How did you find all these I mean, because we're talking about like pre-internet New York City. Like, how did you find all these resources? Like at 14, that's quite an entrepreneurial task, is to find all these places to work on your trade, to practice your acting, to, become better, to surround yourself with peers that are working, all that kind of stuff. Like that's no
It's
small
very
task.
much like Ryan Pyle,
Yeah.
and in that, I nobody was gonna tell me what I couldn't do, and I was just gonna figure out how to do it, and if there wasn't a system to do it in, I'd create the system and just figured it out, got the backstage and found the Ross reports and went down the list and got my little portfolio and took the subway and walked up and down the street and
Yeah.
got it done.
Back in the day when headshots were like a physical book that you had to carry around.
Yes, yes, black and white physical book. My dad, now that said, my dad was a creative director at an ad agency.
Oh, that's great.
So he was totally opposed to the acting thing because, he was familiar with what went on with young women in that environment. So he was very nerve wracked that I would even be getting pictures taken. He was like, "Who's taking them?" He put me with one of his photographer friends who was extremely lascivious nonetheless, but at least my dad knew him.
Mhm.
Um, but he wasn't but at least I got a good photographer, I got good pictures, and then it was basically just me doing it. No one had to drive me anywhere at that time because I could take the subway.
Right, you didn't have to drive around LA bumping into parked cars.
That came later.
Yeah. So what was it like leaving New York then for Yale? I mean, that must have been a bit of a trip going up to New Haven and leaving the big city behind. What?
I hated it so much. I was like, I'm coming back to the city every weekend. This place sucks. The people are horrible. These were people that had like private jets at their disposal. They'd be flying off to Paris for the weekend. They were wearing like full length coats and top hats. And I was just like, what the actual fuck is going on
Mm.
with these people?
They turned it into a country club.
Yeah, but the thing was, I started at a country club.
Right.
So if I had just stayed still, I would have fit in perfectly.
Mhm.
But instead, I just really didn't. I didn't like it. I didn't feel like I could relate to anybody. Eventually, I did. And I just actually got back from my Yale reunion just 2 days ago, and I had the best time, and I made a lot of very good friends ultimately. But initially, it was quite horrific. It was also, the time where it was like the preppies and
Was that like 90s?
80s.
80s, yeah.
Yeah. And the preppies are really bad.
It's a tough group.
Yeah, they were horrible.
Oh,
But now they've mellowed quite a bit.
that's good. And I was reading your bio and you went but you did theater school at Yale, so you did do theater there.
Yes.
Yeah. What was that like?
That was intense. There were, I think, over 250 declared majors when we first entered the track, and every semester you would be kicked out.
Oh.
So you had to audition every semester, and so ultimately, I think there were only 16 of us that made it out with the degree in theater.
So every like 3 months or 4 months, you have to re-audition for your place in the theater group at Yale.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, it was terrible.
No seniority, no legacy, no nothing. Just
No.
bring it or you're out.
Yeah, and the thing was, it as you mentioned, it was very cliquey, and it was very, I don't know how much had to do with merit and how much had to do with whatever else was going on,
Or what your last name was.
and all kinds of stuff like that.
Mhm.
So they kept kicking me out, and I kept not being kicked out.
Wow.
Yeah, every semester they kicked me.
So
Every semester.
that's like 16 semesters, or what is that? Like 12 to 16 semesters over 4 years.
Well, for 4 years, 2 semesters. So
There you-
8 semesters.
So you got kicked out of theater school and got back in 8 different
I
times.
mean, I probably exaggerate,
Yeah.
but a lot. I got told that this wasn't the career for me, that I had no that I my talent, that I should be a doctor or a lawyer,
Mhm.
that it was just not for me, and I was just like, "Whatever."
What's it like being 20 and having someone tell you like your career path or your passion is not what you should be doing. You should be something boring.
Yeah, well, that's been my experience a lot,
Mhm.
I think it's everybody's experience. I don't know, maybe it's not everybody's experience, but,
Some people are just born to be lawyers and doctors, though. Good for them.
yeah, if
It's
they like it and if they like, I could see being a lawyer because you get to really argue with people and debate people and be right.
Mhm.
Um, I could never be a doctor because of all this blood and the stuff. But I think when people tell me I can't do something, it really puts my hackles up.
Yeah, fires the engine
Yeah.
even more. No, I mean, were there any big plays you did at college? Any big characters you got to play?
It ended up that I started because, the undergraduate people would never cast me, never. Um, I just started working with the graduate
Mhm.
students, which was much better because they were obviously much better than the undergraduate. So I started doing a lot of Yale cabaret,
Mm.
and do plays with people that had come from all over the world to study theater at Yale as graduate directors and playwrights. And so I did original plays. I worked with French directors, and yeah, it was really good.
That's wild that you had to bypass the undergraduate theater program so that you could engage in practicing and being better at theater at Yale University. You wouldn't expect that.
No. Well, finally, in the last year, the guy that really was trying to get me out of there constantly finally relented and cast me
Oh.
in his own play on the Yale main stage. But he did cast me as an 85-year-old woman in The Three Sisters.
Oh, Jesus. Maybe some revenge on his part.
Yeah, possibly, because I was very kind of already very suspicious of the whole Me Too aspect of the theater department. There was a lot of Me Too going on.
I can imagine. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been around for far too long, right? Yeah.
And I've never have been the kind of person that even knows what's going on,
Yeah.
so I can't tell if I'm being Me Too'd or not.
Yes. Makes it even more difficult. And then what happened after you graduated Yale? I mean, like how did you go from graduating a 4-year program at Yale to then coming out to Los Angeles?
Well, I was in Screen Actors Guild since I was 14 from doing Sesame Street and other television work. And my mother had said, you cannot do professional acting work while you're in college. You've got to. And I got to college really early. I was 16 when I got there. So I had to listen to my parents, and I didn't do any film or television while I was in college. Maybe I did some on the summers.
Yeah.
But as soon as I got out, I went right back to doing film and TV. And I did a bunch of TV shows and um, in New York on the East Coast.
Hmm.
And then about 2 years into it, I decided to move to LA just because there was just so much more work in Los Angeles than in New York for union actors.
Hmm. That's wild because nowadays it's like the opposite, right? Like everyone's leaving New York and finding work in Atlanta and New Mexico and Texas, all these other places where everyone's filming. But back then, people were pilgrimaging from everywhere to get to LA.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I still think, I know that there's a lot of work in Atlanta and Houston and Louisiana and so forth, but a lot of work is here
Hmm.
because a lot of if you look at the power centers of Hollywood, the showrunners in television, the studios, the directors, they all live, in Malibu. They live in the Palisades. They live in Beverly Hills. They don't want to go move to Louisiana for 6 months.
No.
They really don't. So if there's a way to avoid it, they will. But the thing is, it's so much cheaper.
Yeah.
And that's because I think because there's so much more non-union stuff going on. Certainly for like below the line, there's a lot more non-union stuff than here.
Yeah, for sure. Like anyone on a day rate is working at like half price versus Los Angeles.
It's so gross because there's so much money in this business. Like, why can't you pay people a fair wage?
Yeah.
This is getting back to what we discussed at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's horrifying. Just pay people a fair wage. Nobody has to be paid overpaid, but don't try and underpay people
Mhm.
that really love their jobs, that really, work very hard to get them, that work crazy hours, that give up a lot to be in this business. It's a very, it's not a very glamorous business except as an the after effect can be glamorous.
The red carpet.
The red carpet or how you look or what the hell, but when you're sitting there, in a cold tent, for the 14th hour of the day, it's not that fucking glamorous. And certainly not for the people hauling cable and putting out the craft services and fixing it's not glamorous, but they care about it. And that's why it's so what you see tends to be so good.
Mhm.
So it really bothers me that people would rather just lowball people so that they can't even afford to have a proper lifestyle.
And then alternatively, they go out and spend the exact same amount of money that they made the movie for on marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Isn't
Even
that
if
crazy?
not more,
Yeah.
if not more.
It's wild. Like I keep seeing headlines of like in Variety or Hollywood Reporter and stuff like that of, new movie, $250 million budget. They'll have to put another 250 million into marketing, and it's like for that movie even to make $1 of profit at some stage, it has to break 700 million at the box office
Yeah.
just to be profitable. And I'm like, why put yourself under that much? strain. Like it's just and you're not even paying people well along the way. Like that's going to like, 2 or 3 A-listers and a director
Yeah.
and producer
Director's
fees.
scale.
Everyone else is on scale, yeah.
It's really poor, and then you look at, like, something where they didn't spend a lot of money, but somehow it made huge amounts of money, and you would think that they would wanna try and replicate that model,
Mhm,
like, spend $20,000,000,
mhm.
maybe spend 30 on P&A, but then you could theoretically make even more. I remember I was at Sundance the year that the Blair Witch Project
Oh, that was huge, right? Yeah.
came out. Yeah, well, and it was like a midnight screening. It was just very weird. People were like, "What the hell is this thing?" And what did it make? $250,000,000? What
O
did it
on,
cost?
like, a $250,000 budget or something? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So, it goes to show you, like, you can, and then you can spend, like, huge amounts of money on some crap,
yeah.
and no one's gonna wanna see it.
I would really love I'm thinking about, like, what would be an interesting legacy for like, leave in Hollywood, and I've always thought, like, as a side project or as a full-time project, it'd be amazing to create a studio here where we only make movies for 10,000,000 and under. And instead of making $100,000,000 movie a year, we try to make $10 million movies a year, 10 filmmakers, 10 directors that know what they're doing, tight budgets, try to get the writing as good as you can, try to get A-list actors that are tired of Marvel movies and wanna act and become real characters that are well written. And I'm sure if you did that, that studio would get a massive amount of awards at the end of every year just based on the originality of what they're trying to do.
Well, that's what was going on all throughout the '90s, right? So you had New Line, you had Miramax, you had Focus.
A24, yeah.
Forget A24, that's recent. I'm saying the exact thing that you're saying was the way it worked.
Mhm,
And then what happened was the studios were like, "Shit, what the hell's going on?" And they bought all these things.
mhm.
They bought the New Lines and they bought the Focus, and they subsumed them. And so then they lost their independence to a degree and just became part of the system.
Yeah. And now those movies don't exist anymore. There's like, $1,000,000 movies that go to Cannes that are made in Italy and stuff like that in France, and then there's blockbusters and there's nothing in between.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of what's going on now is a lot of that creative sort of independence is in television.
Yeah, you're right. It has moved over. Or even YouTube, which is making really high quality unscripted content and even really high quality scripted content.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's terrifying.
It is
Mm.
because if you're trying to make something, you do like, so I made a film. Joel was one of the producers on it, and we made it through a Kickstarter.
Mhm.
Um, but that's really not the best way to get a creative project done. That's why Canada is so popular, because the government does review original works and say, "Yeah, this would be good," or France or anywhere but here.
Yep.
We have none of that.
No. Yeah, Spain and Greece are big. They give like a 30% tax rebates, and of course, all their day rate people are on a much lower rate than here in Los Angeles, Canada as well. And you have the dollar, the foreign exchange that works in that favor as well. That's why so many people produce in Toronto and Vancouver and stuff like that.
Yeah, one of my movies is supposed to be made in Canada, but one of the things that's annoying about that is that they demand that the, above the line, that a certain, like, very high percentage of the above the line is Canadian.
I think it's 40 or 50% of the above the line have to be Canadian. So you have to have a few producers, a director, a cinematographer, maybe one of the writers. Yeah, yeah,
And the star a coup at least one of the stars.
yeah. Which is fine if you got Ryan Reynolds and Seth Rogen and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people that back, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago were buying Canadian citizenship just to be able to work as actors.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that a thing? That was a thing.
Yeah. I don't know if it can be a thing, if it's a thing anymore.
Mm.
I think they got wise and they're like, "No." But why how come we let anybody from any country, come in, all the the leads are being played by Australians and Brits and Canadians and whoever, but we don't get reciprocal, um, opportunities.
Just because there's nothing being made in those countries. Let's say, for example, hypothetically, there's 1,000 movies a year that get made in the United States, where the IP is in the United States, where the distribution companies are, the main distribution companies are in the United States, where the studios are in the United States. Okay, so let's say hypothetically there's 1,000. That's a nice round number. Okay, and that's original content. So then, if you go to Canada, in 1 year they might only make 5 movies or 10. In Australia, it might be less. They have a few
What
like.
about England?
I mean, in England, the entire business in England, I would say the majority of money that gets done on projects that get done in England are from Hollywood, that are just like Star Wars gets shot at Pinewood, Game of Thrones was working out in Northern Ireland, Belfast, and we're shooting all around Europe. Like a lot of that stuff is U.S. money going through the U.K. system. A lot of it's not created in the UK for the UK audience, right? So the reason why all these Australians and Canadians are coming to the United States is just because there's so much more volume here. And the reason why Americans aren't getting cast in the UK or Canada or Australia is just because there's so few
Well, also the
productions.
union don't permit it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the British union, the Canadian union doesn't allow it.
No.
When I worked in Canada, it was like a special dispensation from the Queen. You got to get all kinds of paperwork, and then you have to say that there's no Canadian actor that could do as good a job as me in that part. Blah blah blah.
No.
But that's interesting. I didn't know that, but I do see a lot of foreign actors working their butts off in our movies and TV shows.
Yeah, I mean that's why I came here, right? Like that's part of like I came here legally on a work visa, and it took me a long time to get, and it was expensive, and I had to prove that I had like a track record of being independent and being able to make a living, in the entertainment industry, and that I had some certain jobs lined up and things like that. It was really difficult to come here, but I'm a complete immigrant. And it's funny, the conversations around immigration somehow get people like me thrown into the same mix of a conversation as like illegal immigrants coming across the Mexican border. It's like, no, like it took me a year to get my visa. It was really expensive. I had to wait, before I could work and do all these other things. And I'm one group. I don't draw on any government services or government income to live my life. And then you've got like 9 million people coming across the border illegally in the last couple of years. And then somehow that is one immigration conversation, which I think is unfair. Like there's definitely more than one immigration conversation. There's, highly talented people coming here to build businesses and do work. And, I think, what is it like of the Mag 7, like the Magnificent Seven stocks, or there's something like 30 CEOs in the United States of Fortune 500 companies that are of Indian origin,
Yeah.
right? The Google guys are originally from Russia and stuff like that, or Eastern Europe. Like there's people like Elon Musk from South Africa. Like there's people who have come from all over the world to come here to work and build things, right? And I just feel like that is such a different conversation than people coming across the border illegally and not contributing at all.
Well, the way I see it is they do contribute though. Like I I think this was a country built on immigrants, and we've always that was what made us special, was that we opened our hearts and our arms to poor people or people that needed somewhere to go to be free.
When the country was empty.
The country's still empty. Have you ever driven across this place?
I
Like,
have. Totally
seriously, it's so fucking empty.
Yeah.
Give us a break. Like 9 million, like that's fine.
Mhm.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
People like they're going to end up putting prisoners to work in the fields because we're deporting everybody that is willing to do these jobs.
Mhm.
And so that's another thing that's really fucked up is, you're a prisoner and now you're going to be made to work. That's called slavery.
Well, that's been going on for decades, right? Like they've been making license plates or even doing textiles in jails all around the United States.
And now they're fighting fires.
Yeah, that's part of it.
It's disgusting.
There was one of my friends is a professional photographer, and he was covering the Palisades fire, and he was with a unit that was part of a prison unit, and they're volunteer firefighters that are part of a prison unit, and they were actually fighting in the Palisades fire alongside the traditional people who have gone through the regular fire department program.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating how crazy this country is.
This country is nuts.
And for me, I'm just getting used to it. I've only been here for like 18 months or whatever. And it's,
You've only been here for 18 months?
yeah. So I grew up in Toronto and then I lived in China for 18 years. And then COVID hit. And then I was in Dubai and Switzerland off and on. And then I just came here kind of at the end of 2023.
Oh, wow, I did not know that.
And it's been fucking crazy every day since then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming in the election cycle and then the Palisades fires and then all the craziness that's going on now, it's just too much to deal with. I've never lived in such a loud country before there's just no silence ever.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in Switzerland for 2 years and I never even knew the name of the president of Switzerland or the prime minister of Switzerland. Yeah, these people just don't talk every day to the media looking for their names and headlines every single day. You know, it's just a different culture around politics. But yeah, it's very loud here. So you always kind of know what's going on, or at least know what misinformation is being given out at that one moment. Bit challenging.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I don't know why I thought I guess it's because I assumed that while you were doing your TV shows, you were in LA.
No, no, I was based. So I went to China and I did journalism for like a decade. So I worked for the New York Times, Time, Newsweek, Forbes, and Fortune from like 2002 to 2012-ish. But that ended up getting really not good. After the Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008, the many bad things happened at that time. But one thing that happened was the publishing industry really died, the print publishing industry. So around 2009, 10, I moved to television. I started trying to do my own television shows, and that worked out really well. And then I did those I'm still doing them now, but we had to take a little break during COVID. But from like 2010
You
to
did those in China?
so I started filming my first shows in China because I thought it'd be really interesting to show people what China really looks like. So the first TV show I made, my brother and I, we rode motorcycles all the way around China, and we called it Tough Rides China. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Joel talks about that. He actually talked about it today on his
Oh,
show.
did he? That's nice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, I see. So the Chinese media companies subsidized that
No,
show? No.
no. So again, I wanted to make TV shows. No one wanted to work with me. I wrote to BBC, Discovery Channel, Nat Geo, blah blah blah. Everyone said no. You don't have any background in this. We don't trust you with any money or anything like that. So I was like, fuck it. So my brother and I just put in the money and paid for it ourselves. So we just funded our first show together, and then we found a partner to help us edit it and put it all together and package it. And then we got it into the hands of a distribution company, and they ended up selling it to Travel Channel. And then we had a great partnership with that distribution company and Travel Channel for several years. And then after that, I started working directly with like BBC and Discovery and stuff like that, and was able to kind of build a career off of independently financing my own shows and then kind of selling them afterwards, so that I could control the narrative and control all the garbage that we see in television now. Like there's no suspense or fake drama or any scripted stuff. It's really just all honest and transparent kind of emotions and feelings in really amazing places. And that's kind of what we've always tried to do. But it took a massive push at the beginning to create independently, and to kind of keep those values in place over that time, which was really difficult.
So what would you say about how it is now? Are you still able to do that?
No, I mean, not at the same level. So for example, in 2019, which was my best year professionally that I've ever had, I did 10 expeditions in 10 countries in 10 months.
Oh my
So that was 10 episodes. So that was 10 1-hour episodes we shot in 10 months in 10 different countries. And we would do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So we would do an expedition for 2 weeks, walking across a desert, climbing a mountain for 2 weeks, living in a tent, filming. Then we get an hour episode of that. Then we come back, rest for 2 weeks. Then we go back out. We did that for Discovery Channel. And then during the 2 weeks off, I was doing speaking events all the time. So I did like 45 speaking events in 2019.
gosh.
So I was just ripping and rolling. And it was amazing because you think, oh my God, you must have been tired or you must have been like on the verge of burnout. Not at all. It was just creative power. And I could have kept going like that for years. I had a great crew around me. I had editors that had worked with me for a decade. I had camera guys that had worked with me for a decade. Like we were all super fit. We were an elite crew. We were climbing, 25,000-foot peaks in Nepal and Argentina, every other month. We were really, really gelled and really producing at a high level. And then COVID hit, and then we kind of all disbanded because, it just, you just can't pay people to do nothing for 2 or 3 years,
Oh my God.
and we weren't in the United States. We weren't in the United States at that time, so we didn't get any of these, like, government handouts and stuff like that.
Where
So
were you at that point? In
so
Dubai?
in Dubai at that stage, yeah.
And Dubai doesn't have a
Yeah, yeah, no worries. So Dubai is an interesting place that you don't have to pay any tax in Dubai, but no one helps you out either, which is kind of fair.
But they do have I did meet with, went to Dubai, and I actually took a meeting with their, UAE Film Commission.
Yeah.
What maybe they could help.
Yeah, so what they do is they'll give like 30% discounts or tax rebates to Hollywood firms that want to come out, and or Indian firms, like, the companies that are already, fully budgeted, fully fundraised and everything like that, and have a guaranteed distribution. They can come into the UAE and film. Abu Dhabi is the big spot. So like
Yeah.
Dune, for example. So Dune, they like Dune 2, and I only know this because Denis Villeneuve was giving a talk at the Directors Guild theater, and I went and listened, and we watched Dune, and then he talked about it afterwards with Chris Nolan, which was amazing. And Denis Villeneuve was just saying, like, they shot for 6 months, and they were just going back and forth between Budapest, Hungary, and Abu Dhabi. So Budapest, Hungary, they have like some of the biggest
Stages.
sound stages in the world. So they were doing all the indoor stuff and all the stuff in the caves and everything like that. For those of you who have seen Dune, they were doing that in Hungary, and then they were doing all the desert stuff in Abu Dhabi, where they got that UAE tax credit, and they're just going back and forth between the tax credit destinations, right? And then that's how films are made these days.
What about your, relationship with Discovery or Nat Geo and using that to get
Ball rolling again.
with the film commissioner, with the UAE?
Yeah, I mean, that's been an interesting chat too. Like I can get into it in a really deep way if you want. Like all these film commissions, they usually have like a minimum spend. So you need to be kind of in that like 1 to 5 million US dollar range as a film.
Cash.
Yeah, cash. And you have to be able to prove that. And then once you spend all of that, then they'll give you the 30% back as a discount. So you already have to be fully budgeted, and then they'll give you a discount back on top of that. And there's various financial tools if you don't have 100% of the money. Like sometimes you only have 70% of the money, but then you borrow 30, and the
Yeah.
borrower knows you're going to get it back, like a gap loan
Yeah.
or bridge loan. So there's ways of doing that, but my productions will never get into those millions of dollars. I'm always just a little bit under because we do it pretty grassroots. We're
Right.
we're pretty independent. We do things on a small scale. So we've never been able to produce the budgets or produce the financing to get kind of into that upper echelons. We're always kind of just hanging around just below it.
What about MIPCOM? Do you ever go there?
My agents do, yeah, and they sell my shows there, and they get broadcast all around the world. But for fundraising, it's quite hard because I'm not really interested in working in the television ecosystem.
Okay.
Like I quite like being independent. So that just means I have to raise money on my own through corporate partnerships, and then I make my show, and then I give it to my agent, and my agent sells it.
Gotcha.
So I don't have to deal with broadcasters and notes and all these other things. But then also too, it's a little bit difficult if you don't know where to go to raise money. And I feel like the biggest difference, like from 2015 to 2020, I was filming like for 5 straight years, 300 days a year. Like I knew where to find all the money. I knew who wanted what. It was pretty easy and pretty obvious. But nowadays, all the money's changed. Like broadcasters, they're all kind of afraid to lose their jobs. They don't know what's going on. Streamers are taking over, but they want to focus entirely on scripted content because YouTube is gobbling up all the unscripted stuff. The studios don't want to touch unscripted stuff. No one wants to do travel and adventure because it's not premium unless you've got Zac Efron or Chris Hemsworth in it. If you don't have an A-lister, then it's not premium, and then it's on YouTube. So there's this like whole shift about like what's premium, what's not, what's acceptable, what's not, what's being funded, what's not. And then of course, like, how much can you raise to produce shows just on YouTube versus, Amazon Prime or something like that, and trying to like find those pockets of people that are interested in that exposure. But pre-COVID, those conversations were pretty obvious for a middle-aged, mid-career television producer host. But now it's like all upside down.
Oh my God.
Yeah, everyone's scrambling. Like I don't know anyone who's in non-scripted who's thriving. Like we're all just still trying to figure out how the chips have laid after 2002, and then the writers and actors strike even in 2003. Like that even upset unscripted, which is crazy because you don't need right just because the whole industry went went off like risk off. Like okay, there's a strike. We don't know how long this is going to be. We're risk off on everything. Unless you're a Kardashian doing unscripted or an A-lister doing unscripted, like anything kind of below that was too dangerous or too uncertain. Don't worry, the audio will pull that
That's
out.
great.
Yeah. It's wild. Like it is, but even people doing scripted and even people doing film stuff, like they've told me too, like the rules have all changed around fundraising and the way people are funding and the way people are communicating about risk. Um, like all these conversations in the back rooms have totally changed. And then of course the audience has changed too. Like most people don't go to the movie theater anymore. Like they buy huge ass TVs at home and watch at home in the comfort, and watch streaming instead of, going and buying popcorn at a theater and stuff like that. So, everything's changing on both sides of the table.
How does YouTube fund does YouTube take an active position in capitalizing shows that end up on YouTube?
Yeah, so I think YouTube, at least a while ago, they were actually commissioning work. So they were doing that for a while, and I think they've stopped. And I think now um, they're just working with creators and storytellers who are using their ad revenue platform to raise money to make content, and then also having in video ads and stuff like that. So, like so when I post this podcast, for example, I don't have any in-video ads that I've arranged on my own. But over the course of our hour and a half or two conversation, you might see 6 or 7 YouTube ads that come up during that. So I will get a revenue share on all those ads.
Who determines what the ads are?
YouTube has an algorithm for all of that.
And do you get a say? What if they start advertising, murdering puppies?
So you can pick and choose what categories and industries you want to have advertised. So like you can go to pharmaceuticals and supplements and all that and cut that out. You can go to gaming and cut that out. You can go to F&B and cut that out. You can go to sports or whatever. So there's like 15 categories and you can pick and choose which ones you want to have on your, yeah, but of course they warn you, like if you start taking certain categories out, it'll harm your potential revenue, right?
Right.
But you see the pharmaceutical ads on YouTube, they're quite crazy. Like they're just as bad as on CNN and Fox News. Like you see a ton of these advertisements. So I've pulled off the pharmaceutical stuff just because it's a little over the top. But I
Yeah.
accepted kind of all the other potential revenue streams. But the YouTube ad rev is not enough for me personally to start commissioning like new 8 episode television seasons, right? Because you need 7 figures to do that. You need to go out and do it right. 8 countries, 8 months, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, same crew, keep everyone together for the whole thing because it's really physically exhausting. But we haven't been able to kind of like get to that niche level yet.
What if you just get your A-lister to narrate?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because they're not gonna do any of the stuff that they're
No, they're not going to do any of that.
through it, but they will narrate it.
I could get Morgan Freeman to narrate.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing all those commercials.
Yeah. Yeah, and he plays, he's got the whole God thing going, and like, yeah, he's amazing. Like that'd be interesting. Is yeah, maybe trying to get an A-lister to narrate the show instead of actually doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you could easily do that with your track. You show them your various shows, say, look, I'm going to Australia to do this thing. You could get a Chris Helm, whatever his name is, to do it.
Yeah.
It'll take him, what, a day
Yeah.
in the studio to narrate all the 8 episodes?
Yeah, probably. That
Yeah.
would be amazing. Yeah.
Who's your agent?
Here, I don't have one.
You don't have one.
No, I don't. No one wants to work with an independent who goes outside the system to make their own shows and profit from them independently.
I don't know. I don't know. How are you looking for this individual?
Yeah, I've had some lunches. I met some people along the way, and told them kind of what I do and stuff like that. And it hasn't been very interesting. I mean, they want people that they can send out to Netflix and Amazon Prime, for a couple auditions a month and things like that. Whereas again, mostly scripted. Like there's almost not an agent in the world that'll touch an unscripted, non-scripted talent these days. It's really, really, really rare. Yeah. The whole ecosystem's up on its head. But it's an ongoing battle. It's a fun puzzle to try to solve, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like you have nothing to sell, though. That's the thing. It's not like you're some random person that hasn't done anything.
No, we've got
You
over
just
50 hours of adventure content out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, from all over the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What about going to a company like Patagonia or REI and saying, I want to do this. I'll wear all your weird outfits.
yeah, and they're quite good, and but they'll come up with some money from time to time, and North Face and all these great companies, they have a good reputation for helping sponsor athletes and sponsoring filmmakers and stuff like that. And again, it's just the amount is not necessarily always enough. So it's great if you could have like 5 or 6 partners like North Face, to get up to $1 million or $2 million to go out and do 10 episodes or something like that. But
I can think of someone that I want to introduce you to.
oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always nice to meet new people.
Yeah. Somebody that he's got a weird system of how he's doing things. And my friend, he's British and he was doing a lot of commercials. And how he was doing them is he would get a famous feature film director
Mhm.
and then he would get them like a huge, ridiculous amount of money to shoot a commercial in Thailand that nobody would ever see here.
Mhm.
And so he had all those big directors doing ads in places where no one would never ever know,
Mhm.
and they'd get huge paychecks. And then that sort of got very difficult because suddenly everybody found out about it, and then everybody was like, "Wait a minute, I wanna do that."
Yeah.
And so now what he's doing is it's really a very strange thing where he goes to a company and he says to that company, um, it's almost like product integration, but it's not even product integration. It's the brand and the content are sort of conceived simultaneously.
Mhm.
Um, but it seems like a good fit for you.
Anyone who kind of figured out a niche of a way to like fundraise and
Yeah.
and get projects done outside this major studio system
Yeah.
is definitely an interesting person to chat with because I've kind of done the same my own and again that's how you kind of keep your independence is you have to really be creative about how you're going to fundraise without losing control.
Yeah.
And the problem with if you're not an Oscar winning director or an Emmy winning director and you go to Netflix and tell them you're going to make a show, they're probably going to be all over you or just not be interested at all in your project, especially if it's unscripted, right?
Mhm.
So it's much more difficult to kind of get through the door on that front. But that doesn't mean you can't still make 10 hours of television a year that millions of people watch and that you can make a living off of. You just have to find a creative way
Yeah.
to fundraise. So we've got the whole back end. We've got the distribution figured out. We've got the linear television stuff figured out. We got the streaming part figured out.
That's huge.
Yeah, so now it's just fundraising into that system. And so again, like we perfected it before COVID, and now kind of all the rules are different, and now we're just trying to re-perfect the model.
But you still have the same partners for distribution.
No, different, all different now.
Oh.
Yeah, so like we might still work with some of our old linear partners, like BBC Earth and Discovery Channel as well, but we're fully focused on streaming and trying to get the biggest global audience. So YouTube is by far like the biggest global platform, but you just have to make sure you can guarantee eyeballs, which is quite hard. But then like Amazon Prime have quite a good footprint and they're quite open to travel and adventure content. And we have all of our stuff on Amazon Prime as well. But then there's other places like Tubi, which is growing really quickly, and they're a free service, but you have to watch advertisements. And then Roku is also huge, and they're also huge in the UK and in Australia, New Zealand as well, like the major English-speaking territories. So when you go to a corporate partner, and you can put some of these things together and say we're going to have these audiences in the English-speaking world, and it's going to be on these platforms, and then it gives you a chance to really raise some money. Because when you're raising money independently, you have to work backwards, right? Like you have to have the distribution lined up and then try to monetize that distribution and then make the show that you want to make. Whereas if you're doing scripted stuff, it's more like, you're working on the script, you're finding the actors, and then at the very, very end, you're finding your distribution because then you're going to Cannes or you're going, then you have an agent that's shopping it around and that bit's always last.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a reverse on the
So
model.
interesting.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the Chinese, like, influx of this thing called verticals?
No, I haven't heard about this. What's verticals?
So verticals are a new mobile TV based application that apparently people are making like head hand over fist money making these things. They're very short episodes.
Mhm.
And it's a subscription base. So let's say this is what I've heard. All the actors are doing them. All of the actors are doing these verticals because they pay you. Maybe they'll pay you $200,
Right.
but at least they pay you,
Right.
and you can do like 20 episodes. It's kind of a little bit right now like a weird soap opera.
Mhm.
Um, but from what I understand, they made something like $300 million last year on verticals, and we don't even really so let's say they give you 10 free, and then after that, you have to start paying,
Sure.
like $5.99 a month or something, and they have millions of people that have gotten hooked on these characters or these each little episode ends on a cliffhanger.
Sure.
But there would be a way, I think, to take the adventure travel model
Mhm.
and do them as verticals. They'll leave you hanging on the cliff. Do you want to see if Ryan made it off the mountain?
Yeah.
Um,
Because we have to do that anyways when when we close off one of the episodes. Like we have to leave it as, yeah, for sure. And then we bring it back at the next episode where we answer the
but
questions that
these
were.
are like 2 minutes.
Do you remember Quibi?
Yeah, so it's kind of, I guess it's Quibi. I don't know why it's Chinese, but since you lived there,
Yeah.
maybe you should look into that, and you would be like the only one doing non-scripted in
Mhm.
that format.
That'd be interesting. I'll definitely have a look at that. That'd be wild. Yeah. Verticals and TikTok.
How do people make money on TikTok? I don't understand.
Just ad rev share, just like YouTube. So if you get a million views on a video, they'll give you part of the rev share of whatever a million views of advertisements get.
But I don't see ads when I watch TikTok.
Oh, because there are ads. And
Don't you just go like this?
I guess some people do, but maybe other people watch them or don't skip them or
Actually, come to think of it, that's how I was introduced to Temu.
on a
I was
TikTok ad.
yeah,
Yeah.
because the girl said, "Look, I got this big bag of free stuff." And
Yeah.
I was like, "You did?" She said, "All you have to do is give them this code
Mhm.
and they'll give you all this free stuff." And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah. That sounds like a good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if you leave your phone too close to you, like the other day, I was chatting with someone, and your phone's listening to you all the time, whether you have TikTok on it or not. And I had a podcast with someone. We were just talking about the benefits of sauna and how great he recently got a sauna and has incorporated it into his daily routine. And he's noticed a lot of health benefits and physical fitness benefits and all this kind of stuff. And now all I get is sauna advertisements on my phone.
Are you serious?
Absolutely, on all social media platforms, whether it's X, YouTube, Instagram,
That's
Facebook.
really terrifying,
No,
though.
but it's the future. Like everything's listening to us all the time and predicting what we want. I didn't mean to lay that on you. I thought you might know that already.
I think, but we should be able to game that system somehow. Yes, I always just tell them, say things like, "Boy, that Ryan Pyle show is incredible. Have you seen it? It's the best thing on TV. It's on YouTube, it's on Amazon Prime. It's really, I mean, I think everybody I know is watching it every single day. Have you seen it?"
And tonight when you go home for dinner, that'll be the first thing that pops up on your phone.
One would hope, right?
One would hope. Yes, that's true.
It's like when I was in, Virginia, me and my vice president, Natalie White, we were trying to tell people that the Equal Rights Amendment, had a shot at happening in Virginia, and it would save women all over the country, and we would wander through because Walmart was really all the only thing there.
Mhm.
So we'd wander up and down the aisles of Walmart talking loudly, and I'd be like the person that didn't know. "What do you mean women are not equal?"
Mhm.
And she'd be like, "No, and this year," and we just and do it in the checkout line, and yeah.
We got to get back to you here. So okay, so hold on. Okay, so you come out of Yale. You promised your parents you wouldn't do any film or television work, so you did theater work when you were at school. You come out of Yale, you do 2 years in New York, and then you're like, "Fuck this, LA is where all the work is, and I'm gonna go out west."
Yes.
So, okay, so walk me through that. What was it like leaving your parents in Brooklyn or in New York and coming out west for the first time?
Well, my friend Martha, who I went to Yale with at the theater, she had already come out, so she had an apartment and I moved in with her. And then I had been trying to learn how to drive in New York before I left. Yeah, so apparently they thought I learned. So when I got here, I got my little $700 car. It was a Chevy Nova, which is a great car. By the way, you can hit anything with that car,
And it bounced right back.
and nothing happens to you.
Oh,
It's
really?
like a tank. Um, and I just started auditioning, and I booked something within 2 weeks of getting here.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I never stopped, and I never had to get a job.
That's wonderful. You never had to do the waitressing or anything on the side?
Yeah.
Oh. And I mean, so you were like 24, 25 when you were getting
22.
Oh, that's right, because you went to Yale early.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that like? You're 22, you're living in LA, you got no family around you, and you're actually like making a living and paying rent and being independent. Like that must have felt amazing. And you were following your dream.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was, yeah, I was wild and woolly.
So I'll in the description and stuff like that, I'll put all your credits and things like that because you have an incredible amount of wonderful credits. You've worked with some of the best people in this city, working at the highest levels, and we don't have to kind of get into all of that. But what made you then like have this successful acting career, and then be like, well, I want to get into politics.
Well, I think it was more like, um, it was kind of bugging me that as a female in the business and as a female, what people perceive, because nobody knew that I was half Indian, so they just thought that I was Mexican American. That I would just get the same parts. I literally played Maria 8 times one year.
Oh, shit.
And I always had to talk with a really thick accent, and I was always, you know, I was either a house cleaner or I was a prostitute.
Very pigeonholed.
I mean, really ridiculously so. But nobody thought it was ridiculous at that time. They were like, "Yes, of course, you should play Maria. She's a very industrious housekeeper, or she's a very talented prostitute." It's like people just, and I started to get very irritated by that because I have nothing against prostitutes or housekeepers, but I just was neither of them at that point.
And now, and after one,
Then I've really gotten into both of those, but
yeah.
at that time, I didn't have as much experience with those things. So I just thought, well, something's gotta be done. So I created my own production company, started writing and directing my own short films and trying to get my own projects off the ground and so forth. And that, as you know, is incredibly difficult. And also, it doesn't help to be female. Like, there were times where I'd go into studio meetings and I had a writing partner that was a guy, and they would just assume that I was the stenographer.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And they would start singing like hockey songs or something. It was just very annoying. Um, and I just kept looking, and then also there was a lot of sexual harassment going on. Not to me in particular, but just in general. There was all kinds of, like, people trying to always pressure me to be naked or to do things that I felt uncomfortable with, and, yeah, I wouldn't do them, but I'd often get fired because I wouldn't do them, or I'd get fired because I didn't like the racial stuff that would go on set, and I'm not one to stand for it, so I'd be like, "Yo, don't do that," and didn't matter who the hell the person was, so, I'm a bit of a prickly sort.
Yeah, and this is the Harvey Weinstein era.
Oh, yes, and I would go into people's offices, and they'd have, like, stacks of headshots, and they'd be, like, going through, and then they'd have their assistant make dates with this pile, and the other pile would go in the garbage.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was very irritated with that, and I was writing feminist, and then Neil LaBute was writing all this stuff that he was like the darling of the town. I don't know if you know who he is.
I don't know Neil LaBute.
I think he's Canadian. But he wrote a series of movies that were like hyper misogynistic and were hugely successful, independent films.
Oh, really?
I think one was called, I don't know, but if you look him up, and he's a smart guy, so it was kind of in the vein of Soderbergh's, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and, the one with the assistant where Maggie Gyllenhaal was playing the submissive secretary, and so there was a lot of, like, sex and power stuff going on, but none of it coming from our point of view. Right now, there's just a lot of stuff, but at that time, it was all really, frustrating.
White male perspective.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's coming back around in case people missed it. Just hold on a couple of months. It's coming back big time, so don't worry, you'll be able to Me Too as many people as you like by Christmas. But for now, it's a little hazardous. So I just said, "What the actual F is going on here? Like, why is this so imbalanced?" Like, I felt like on the one hand, society was telling women that they could be, do, and have whatever they wanted, that they were, empowered. You had Madonna, she was sexy and doing all this stuff. But then it was kind of shitty the way we were being treated in the business in particular, but everywhere. And I ended up making my first feature film was based on a play that my cousin Jean Marie Simpson, who was the executive director of Nevada Shakespeare Company, had written this one woman show about Jeanette Rankin, who was our first female congresswoman, who was elected before women had the vote. So she actually rode around Montana and convinced 80,000 men to vote for her.
That's incredible. That's a hell of a story, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
How come that hasn't been turned into a movie yet?
because no one gives a rat's ass about women.
Yeah.
Let's just be frank.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, because that is the movie that should be made. That's like The Reds. That's a woman whose career encompassed almost a century, who grew up on a ranch where Native Americans were. She grew up with them as her best friends. Then the army came in and slaughtered all of them. She was a huge pacifist, voted against U.S. entry into both world wars, was in Congress to make those votes both times. Just a fantastic story. So I made a very, very, Jean Marie was able to secure a $60,000 grant from Nevada Shakespeare for us to essentially turn this one woman show into a film. But it was a very obviously limited scope. We shot it kind of like a play. We got a sound stage and we had a weekend for free.
Mhm.
And we just set up the scenes and we would roll from back and forth and do them. But I went to show that film at the Smithsonian Institute because they were having an exhibition called Women of Our Time, and Jeanette Rankin was one of the women. And so they were showing my film, and I was so impressed with myself, I must say. I was like, look at me.
At the Smithsonian.
I'm at the Smithsonian. I directed a film. I'm so fantastic. And Joel and I went there, and we were walking through the lobby before the screening started, and they had a bunch of actresses dressed as historical figures wandering around the lobby, sort of interacting with the guests. And I thought, oh, dear God, I am going to be doing this very soon.
Mhm.
When no one will hire me, I'm going to be, dressed up as Hedda Gabler or something wandering around.
At a cocktail party.
Yeah.
Or an event.
Yes,
Yeah.
and quoting things and, so I better be nice to these women because they're here, there go I. So there was one and she was dressed kind of in suffrage gear. And I went up to her and I said, "Hi, who are you?" And she looked at me very seriously, straight in the eyes, and she said, My name is Alice Paul, and I'm back to haunt you because you've done nothing to get the federal Equal Rights Amendment ratified, and women in this country are still not equal.
Wow. And that was one of the actors.
Yeah. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Like 96% of Americans who thought that women were already equal.
Mm-hmm.
Given.
Under the law.
Yeah.
But it's not the case.
No, not
I mean, you're educating all of us, right? That's the point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so I was like, this lady's high.
Yeah. What year was that?
This was 2008.
So 2008, someone comes up to you and says, women are not equal under the federal law of the United States, and you're not doing anything about it.
That's right. And then I said, oh, no.
All right.
No. Because I honestly could see the trajectory from that exclusion to what was going on in Hollywood, to what was going on in hotel rooms, to what was going on factory floors, to what was going on for women all over the world. And I thought, well, I can't really just let this go. I've been roped into this.
So after your directorial debut, and you still have a successful career as an actor or actress, then you just decided, like, okay, I'm going to make equality my thing.
I figured it would take like 8 months.
Not a decade.
No, it's been like 16 years. I figured it'd take like 8 months because I had been working on this campaign for the Writers Guild called Speechless Without Writers. This was during the writers' strike.
The first one in 2008, right? Or in 7?
Or 7, yeah. And what we did was we made these little tiny short videos of famous actors getting their scripts, opening them up, and they were blank and being completely unable to do anything.
I think I saw that campaign.
Yeah.
I saw some of those videos. Yeah.
Yeah. So we shot like 70 of them. And we started pumping them out through Deadline Hollywood Daily, which at the time was a very small independent thing. Nobody knew Deadline, but they had this kind of edge to them where they were kind of like only the people in the know would know.
Mm-hmm.
And so people started watching them, and we had everybody. We had Sean Penn, we had Woody Allen, we had everybody you've ever heard of did one of these, and it ended the strike. It totally affected because Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart picked it up. It was on Time Magazine, picked it up. All these people were like, "Why won't they pay the writers? It's like a minuscule percentage based on their work.
Mm-hmm.
They're the originators of the IP. You're not going to pay them 6% or whatever ridiculous amount." And so I thought, well, that worked in 4 months to get Hollywood to its knees to pay writers. We can do that for women in 8 months. I'm just going to do the same thing. Famous last words.
Famous last words. But wow, that's amazing that you decided to dedicate yourself to that while already having, a successful film and television career. Like, because, most people would just leave politics to the politicians and just go back to work.
But how will we ever get anywhere? Like, I could tell.
So you got to rely on someone else to pick up the shoe, right?
But they're not going to do that. I would still be playing Lupita, the, very conscientious housekeeper, which I may be playing next week. I'm not ruling it out.
Right.
But I just couldn't. It also infuriated the fuck out of me that this country tells everybody all persons are equal and should be treated equally under the law. But we're not persons, or we're not what the hell. And so I really had to educate myself before I could figure out how to communicate it to other people. So that's why it took me a very long time. I interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. My initial draft, my first draft of the script, which I co-wrote with Ginny Sykes, I think it was 797 pages.
Oh, Jesus.
The original cut was 4.5 hours. I had 26 or 27 subject areas that I looked at whether legal equality would affect that area, and if so, how, and would it help women or harm women. And in every single area, It absolutely makes a huge difference.
So walk me through this because I'm totally ignorant about this and I feel embarrassed. But I will use the fact that I'm not an American citizen and I'm new to the country as an excuse. So what areas in U.S. federal law are men and women not equal, or women not equal to men?
So when the U.S. Constitution was written, women were actually owned by their fathers, and then when they married, they were owned by their husbands. So they actually had no rights at all.
Right. Okay. I knew part of that, and I also know women didn't get the right to vote in the United States until the
1920.
right 1920.
So up until then, anything that happened in the Constitution, all the amendments that took place between the beginning of the country all the way through to 1920 did not apply to women.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So all that progress that the United States made from 1776 to 1920, none of that.
Included us in any way. And it was made explicit to me by Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, who said, women are not equal in this country. If you don't like that, then you need to change that. You can't just assume, that now that they are. So
So how, give me an an example, like.
So let's say that we both do a travel show for Nat Geo. We both get 10 episodes. We both are doing essentially the same thing, but you get paid $20 million and I get paid $500,000,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Right now, I can take them to court. I can lay out all the evidence. I can go to trial. But at the end of the day, there is no guarantee of equal protection of our laws for me and you. So even if I prove it out, there's no requirement for the government to give me equal protection or equal pay or equal anything.
But that's a private contract, right? That's
So
so
let's say
that's
the government, here's an example.
okay. Because I could have like 100 million Instagram followers and you could have 500,000 Instagram followers.
But let's say all things being equal, right?
Right.
So we're talking about equal work or work of equal value. I'll give you an example. Uh, our child care workers are paid substantially less as a group than our valet parkers.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Why? Not because we care more about our cars than our kids, but because one group is predominantly, almost exclusively female, and the other is the opposite. In a hotel, for instance, there's janitorial staff and there's housekeeping staff. They both mop, they both sweep, they both dust, they both do trash. They do very similar work, and it's work of equal value. But the janitorial pay is multiple times more than the housekeeping pay. Why? Because one group is substantially female.
And I think the plumbers are unionized too, right? And the housekeepers aren't.
The housekeepers are.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And they still can't get their wages to be similar to the.
No, it's different parts of the union.
Yeah, because entertainment's super subjective. Because people make decisions that don't make any fucking sense in this town, whether you're male, female, or
Well,
otherwise.
let's look at we have a great example in that Jennifer Lawrence movie where she was the biggest star of all the people in the film, but she discovered, I think this was a David Russell film that she was doing.
Oh yeah, with Christian Bale and yeah, American Jiggle. No, yeah, something. What was it? I remember.
Yeah, and she discovered that all of those guys that weren't as popular as her were making like 3 or 4 times that. Okay, Jean-Claude Van Damme makes more per picture than Meryl Streep.
Insanity.
Yeah, so but that's an outgrowth of this basic inequality. And the basic inequality comes from the fact that the country never saw us as equals, and we were never able to establish that in the Constitution. Because even if you have a wonderful employer, blah, 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 let's look at a rape case or a sexual assault case or a child custody case. The bottom line is there's no guarantee of equal protection of our laws. And that's really important,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
That's
That's the ball game,
hmm
is that the law is not applied the same to me necessarily as it is to somebody else.
You think that if you were an American citizen, that the laws would be applied equally to any and
That's
all
what
citizens.
96% of Americans believe, which is why nobody knows about this, not because and I feel like and this is part of the reason why I decided to dedicate myself to this, is because I feel like it's deliberate that we don't know this.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's a misinformation campaign.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what about the young lady that's growing up that, like me, that thinks she's the best, the smartest, the thing, and then she comes up against it and goes and she doesn't know the history or the law, and so she internalizes it and says, "You know, I suck. I'm I'm not as good." But it's not true, right? So you have a whole this is where the psychology comes in, where I think I think it's dastardly that we would have women believing themselves inept or, not good enough when in fact it's they work even harder to get anywhere and they still can't quite get there, but it has nothing to do with what they're doing.
You know, it's funny, like politics in this country is so confusing and there's people out there that make it confusing and keep it confusing because there's so many people that profit from the gaps in the law and the gaps in representation. And it's so many, and there's so many established businesses that reap rewards from those gaps in coverage and things like that. Like, it's funny, but this clause does not exist in the Constitution, right? Like, all American citizens will be treated equally under the law, regardless of age, sex, color, religious back. Like, that's an easy thing that you could add to the Constitution of the United States, and you would think that 100% of the House and 100% of Congress, and 100% of the state governors, whatever it takes to amend a constitutional amendment, like whatever that takes, like 100% of everyone could agree to that one line.
They
But
can't.
no way.
They cannot.
No, not even
It's
close.
been 100 I mean, Alice Paul wrote the ERA with Crystal Eastman in 1923. It was put into Congress in 1923. We've been fighting for it ever since.
Insanity.
It just goes to show you how little they think of us or how scared they are of us, one or the other or some combination of both. And you have to look at why that would be. And then you look at the psychology of the mother and how without a mother, a little baby just drops dead and so I think that there's part of it where there's so much fear of the power of the mother that you've got to keep that whole thing tamped down.
Yeah. Which doesn't make any sense. Like, you got to unleash that power. Like, let women do their bit. Like let's all try our best to do the best for all of us all the time to make the world that we're living in the best. And if a woman has a great idea, or a man has a great idea, or a legal immigrant has a great idea, let's just all get on top of that idea and make something better, right? Like,
Absolutely.
why is there so much debate over any of this?
I really couldn't tell you, but I mean, I find it, almost like I can't get past it. I cannot get past it.
Well, you know what? Like, I mean, you have to remember, like, you could go back to like ancient Rome, like thousands of years ago, where, these senators were sitting around, these kings and princes, and they all basically agreed at that time that you can make more money off of conflict than you can out of peace. And I just feel like from that era, which basically Western democracy was built off of, um, and up until today, there's been a huge group of people that have just massively profited from chaos, misinformation, war, internal conflicts, and now, within the United States, sure, we're not seeing like a civil war, but we're seeing a civil war of ideas and a civil war of debate and a civil war between two parties. Like, and there's a small group of people that massively benefit from having no one listen to anyone else and everyone just yelling all the time. And I feel like we're perpetually stuck in this until someone who doesn't have a financial cent to gain in it can somehow evolve beyond it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's women.
Yeah, you'd have to think someone would put a clear vision into what needs to be done and not think about stuffing their Cayman Islands bank accounts and just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, and they've done studies that where women participate at a level of more than 30%, there's a lot more harmony. There's a lot more sort of collaboration because, and I'm speaking generally now, right? Women, because they're mothers and they've got all this stuff that they have to sort of, they can't just go, I'm going from A to B and I'll run over whoever's in the way. They've got to make sure that everybody's taken into account. They don't want power over. They want to delegate power. So, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and we'll get this done.
That's very un-American.
It's also very unmale,
Yeah.
right? Men, I'm the boss. Look at the pissing match right now between
Elon and Trump.
Elon and Trump. I've got a bigger dick. No, I've got a bigger bank account. No, you were in the Epstein things and you're not going to get, and it's like, in the meantime, you're going to throw my 86-year-old mother off her health care.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
They just don't seem to care. And the fact that Musk said that empathy was the problem with Western civilization, that was his recent quote, that the entire reason that Western civilization is failing is because there's too much empathy going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, just sit back, let the women, just give us, how about this? The patriarchy has had, I don't know, 5,000 years. Let's call it 500 years if you want. Just give us 5 years.
Yeah.
Step back, step aside, give us 5 years to handle the situation. I think it would really work.
It would be a refreshing. It would be It would be like a breeze of fresh air coming through.
And men could relax. They could be like, oh my God, I don't have to be in charge of everything. Everybody's not staring at me going, did you fix it? Did you get it? Did you make the money? Did you? Just let me, I'm going to lay in the hammock and play with my cat and let the ladies take care of it.
Just take a little 5-year holiday and see what happens.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's so bad now globally that you'd have to say like any radical idea is worth like listening to. Obviously there are women who are competent and successful enough to win a campaign on their own. I'm not saying that's not an issue, but it'd be great to just be like, okay, the next one is going to be female, and let's see what happens, and let's roll the dice, and because we've been doing the same fucking thing for decades, and it's not really getting us anywhere. We're not any happier. Inflation is eroding the middle class. There's only rich people and poor people left. Everyone else is drowning or treading water, up to their nose in debt and all this shit. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. The Native American societies had all these things in place to sort of mitigate that. Like when the men would go out to war parties and stuff, when they'd come back to the village, they were isolated for 2 weeks. They weren't allowed to just come back in with all that aggression and
Testosterone.
and violence. And then they were brought back in. And Mahatma Gandhi said that the woman is the dharma of the human species.
Mhm.
So
It's so strange that every single man on this planet came from a woman. And it's amazing that that's the society, almost every society that we live in is so unequal between the genders. I mean, I think you've got maybe like Scandinavia as a place that is,
Iceland apparently is the best.
yeah, and I've been to Iceland and it's wonderful, and the women are amazing, and the men are amazing. Like, it seems like a country that works. Like Scandinavia, you hear good things about as well. Switzerland, I lived in for quite a while. It's quite a from the outside looking in, it's quite nice. I don't know, but like to be born there, to have to live there your whole life, I don't know what that's like. But there are kind of examples where people have gotten out of the way and gotten out of the way of politics and just done the right thing, right? And I just don't get why this country makes it so difficult.
I think that we are addicted to the capitalism that we're experiencing in the United States is really vicious. It's really inhumane.
That's a great way to describe it, actually. Inhumane. I like that.
And it also seems to be like an addiction. It's almost like a cancer where you just have to have more money, apparently. Like there's never any. They've done studies. Apparently, you get to about $100,000 or 115 or something, or that certain things are met. Certain, you've got food, you've got a roof over your head, your kids are okay, you get to go out every once in a while. That's about as happy as you will be. Then you get more money and you get more money, it actually makes you less happy.
Mhm.
And then you get this sort of uh almost like an addictive quality where you start to hoard money and you start to think people are taking money from you and then you're going to take it from them, and it's really it's pathetic.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, like, with AI coming and the massive job losses that are expected to join that evolution, as AI rises, we'll have a lot of job losses across the world and in various industries, and everyone says, like, this is coming. And because of AI and because of how a lot of these jobs are gonna be automated and a lot of people won't have to work anymore, it's it seems like people are finally starting to talk about, like, a universal basic income for people, to say, like, "Look, like, you don't have to work, but try to do something positive with to society, have children, raise them, and here's an annual salary of whatever, is that amount." And it'd be interesting to see if something like that gets adopted in the next 5 or 10 years, as our automation capabilities and artificial intelligence capabilities somehow, like, render, half of the population of the world, without a job or something like that. I mean, that might be coming soon, right?
Right.
And then we
How
might have
are they going to buy products? I don't understand why. Unless you do that, unless you give them some kind of income, what are they thinking? They'll just starve to death and be on the street, or what is the plan here?
I don't think there is a plan. I think it's gonna be a lot like COVID. I think all of a sudden something's gonna happen and, like, half the people won't have a job to go to, you know, which kind of happened during COVID. Maybe less people got fired, more people had to work from home or were furloughed temporarily for several months and stuff like that. But the government just had to feed people money to keep them alive, right? So now I think, like, that's going to be like how it starts, where it's like, holy shit, like, I don't know, all of a sudden in the last 12 months, AI has rendered 100 million Americans unemployed. Like, how the fuck did that happen? How did we not see that happen? Well, you're the government, you're always going to be a few years behind the curve. So they're going to splash a bunch of money. The debt will rise massively. And then they're going to have to find a way to actually budget for some kind of universal income to keep people consuming and alive, and to keep their families alive, and to keep them being,
Or they won't keep them alive. That's the other option.
well, then it's like, okay, so then, then what, like 100 million people fall off the face of the earth and pass away or turn into dust. And then, okay, you got 250 million Americans now. Do you have jobs for all of them? And then what, AI gets smarter 3 years from now and takes the rest of the jobs away? Like, it's interesting, but at some stage, we're going to have too many people for jobs, or the jobs will be too smart for the people. And there's going to be a whole bunch of us doing nothing. And I don't know how that works. Not to make it any more depressing, apart from the equality.
I think that's absolutely right, that's what's going to happen.
Feels like it.
I don't think that they give a shit at all. I think that in a way, a lot of these people, these really wealthy people, um, they look at the rest of us as non-player characters, just random dots wandering around. They don't even really believe that we're human.
We're batteries in the matrix. They just suck us dry. That's all. That's it.
That's what I think. I think that a lot of them don't have empathy. They may be on the spectrum where they don't feel things quite the same way.
Sure.
Um, because otherwise, how could we be the richest country in the history of humankind? And I don't know if you've been down to Skid Row lately.
I haven't, but I've
Have
seen
you
it.
ever
Yeah,
been
yeah.
there?
Mhm.
So it's really crushing. It's like people with no hope, with no where to go, with nothing to eat, and it's just demoralizing.
That's on Reagan, though, right? When he defunded the federal,
Uh,
mental health hospital system, and basically just put people out on the street, and now you've got generations of people who have just lived on the street. And then, like you said, with the Native Americans, when the men came back from war, they were kept outside so that they could decompress before they rejoined society. And I've had many veterans sit in the same seat as you, tell me about how they almost killed themselves when they came back from Iraq or Afghanistan because they couldn't reintegrate with society here, and people hated them for fighting a war for their own country abroad. Like it's just so fucked up.
And a lot of women, that are old, like, I think in the film Equal Means Equal, which I highly recommend you watch, it is on Amazon Prime,
Great.
but it has a statistic about how many of our elderly poor are women. I think it's 70%.
That's crazy.
And so, because they have made less money their whole lives, so by the time they have less chance at a pension, their Social Security is much lower, they live longer.
And inflation's eating away everything.
So a lot of these people on the streets are older women.
That's
That's
crazy.
very, very bad because a lot of other things happen to them from being on the streets as well.
I never made that connection before. That's awful.
It is awful.
Yeah. What's going on? What's going on with this city? What's going on with this country?
We need people s- to not, to see if something is wrong, to not just continue,
Yeah.
to stop being so self-centered, to stop worrying so much about self-care and worry a little bit more about other care.
It's interesting. My grandfather passed away a long time ago, but when he was still alive, I guess kind of like late 90s, and I was in university at the time, him and my dad and I had a conversation, and I was studying international politics at the time and learning about international governance and the way different countries, manage their business internationally and things like that. And we had a great conversation. And my grandfather at the time would have been almost 80, and my dad at the time would have been, mid 50s or something like that. And my grandfather was saying, like, in his generation when he was growing up in the 30s and 40s, the people who entered politics were really good people. They were stand-up people in the community. They were people who had good reputations. They were people who gave up great business careers because they wanted to serve and do some kind of public good. And and then and then it was funny because then my dad chimed in, and he's, 30 years younger than my grandfather, and he goes, in my generation, all the really great people, all the really smart people, all the really ethical people, they all went into business because you could make more money in business than you could in politics. And this was, in the 70s and the 80s when the stock market really started booming and helping everyone out. So he's like, oh, this great wave of people in the 30s and 40s went into public service, and then in the 60s, 70s, and 80s they got disengaged with politics, or they started believing less in politics. Maybe the Vietnam War had something to do with that. And then they went into private enterprise to make their living and to make their money, and they just thought the government was not worth the time or the energy or the money. And then what happened was all these kind of less good people ended up in politics, and all these scoundrels and criminals and people with low moral values and no empathy and all that kind of stuff. And now this is what we're dealing with today. And these are people who have been, these are people who will lie through their teeth if a company gives them $1 million to say something different. And you know what I mean? Like it's an entire generation that's been financially co-opted,
And these people are having children. God knows what they're being taught.
and they're going to Yale and Princeton, and then going right straight to their House of Representatives, and even taking over the seats of their parents. And the nepotism just continues. Like, people talk about nepotism in Hollywood, but nepotism in DC or in those districts and stuff is way worse. No, it's terrifying. So are you done with the activism? Are you done with your equality work? Are you back in Hollywood full time?
I am back in Hollywood full time, but I'm not done with the activism thing because I just
It'll never be done.
it won't be done until it's done, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but I am trying to balance it a bit more so that I can enjoy my life and be creative and have my creative pursuits fulfilled. But I have two lawsuits right now. One is Equal Means Equal versus Donald Trump. Um, and it's to enforce the Equal Rights Amendment. And it's a very strange lawsuit because it's asking the government, it's compelling the government to recognize that women should have to sign up for selective service, which is kind of unpopular. It's the draft.
Okay, right.
So if men have to sign up for the draft, then from my point of view, women have to sign up for the draft as well, because it's not, equal means equal, right?
Sure. I didn't even know you could sign up for the draft. I thought the draft was just the draft, and if you got picked, you had to go.
Yeah, but you have to, there's a little website for the Selective Service, and if you go there now, when you're 18, you're supposed to go there and register for Selective Service. So should there ever be a draft, which I highly doubt there will ever be one, but should there be one, you have to be registered from the age of 18. And when you go there and it has a box that says I'm a male or I'm a female, and if you click I'm a female, it takes you to a page that says 404 page not found.
Oh, really? So there's just not
There-
even a starter.
no, you're not allowed.
Wow.
So there was a gentleman who turned 18, and he filed a lawsuit saying, "How come I have to sign up for this? I feel discriminated against." It's a men's rights case on its face, but the money behind it is the Koch brothers. Have you heard of them?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The Koch brothers,
Yeah.
the conservative political engineers,
Right. So
billionaire family.
they are getting behind this lawsuit. And so, our attorney, who's a professor of law at New England Law, Boston, and she's a top litigator for social women's rights and so forth, she said, "Well, we should not permit a men's rights case to decide whether or not our equality is valid." And so we filed the exact same lawsuit, but saying we should have the rights. So that's working its way towards the Supreme Court. And then another situation that we have is that in January of this year, I don't know when you did the show with Joel, but I moved to DC for the end of the Biden administration and the transfer of power to try and get Biden to publish the Equal Rights Amendment, because we managed to get the final 3 states ratified. A constitutional amendment requires 3/4 of the states at 38 states, and when I found out about this, there was only 35, and it had completely stopped. So I started working on this, and then I made the film, and I took the film around to all the different states that still hadn't ratified and gave it to their state legislators and said, "Look, we've got to make a vote on this and make it happen." We ended up getting Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia. But after the amendment has been ratified, it has to be published in the Constitution. And that's done by the congressional librarian, who's called the U.S. archivist. And they were not doing it because Donald Trump, in his first term, ordered them not to. It's the first time in history that a duly ratified amendment has been blocked. So we finally get it done, and then it gets blocked.
That's crazy. How can the president block that?
He just said to the archivist, "You're not doing that or I'll fire you." And so he was like, "Okay, I'm not doing it." So we sued.
Wow.
We had our first lawsuit was Equal Means Equal versus David Ferriero, who was the U.S. archivist at that time. And and also the 3 states also sued the archivist, Virginia, Illinois, and Nevada. Both cases were dismissed for lack of standing, which is really ridiculous because it basically means you don't have the right to speak for women. They said to the states where the majority of their population had voted to give women equality, and in our case, to a women's organization that's made up of people that are trying to get women's equality. So it begs the question, then who does have the right?
Who does speak for women in the United States if it's not a
Women.
if it's not
If it's not women or the states, I mean, who gets to tell the federal government that they're doing the wrong thing?
yeah, and who like it's always like anytime you figure out why something in this country doesn't work, the best way to figure out why it doesn't work is just follow the money, right? So who benefits from not having women as
Everybody. So the U.S. government saves $1.7 trillion a year.
Really?
Yeah, from paying women unequally to
Is that just federal like government
just
salaries?
government, just government. Imagine what it is in the private sector.
It's got to be way more in the
Oh
private
my
sector.
God, it's probably, I don't know what comes after trillions.
I don't know either. Yeah, lots.
Yeah, bazillions, Brazilians, I don't know.
1.7 trillion a year just in government employee salaries
Yeah,
because of there's unequal footing between.
equal pay. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's one thing. So we know that the companies, even though the companies all signed on to our lawsuits, but they signed on knowing that nothing was going to happen. So that happened. Then Biden came into office and we assumed, well, obviously he's gonna, because was a big supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment.
And his vice president was female. And he said, we're going to have a cabinet that looks like the American population. We're going to have a government that looks like he said all these things. I remember.
Right.
And nothing?
Nothing. Less than nothing. In fact, they kept fighting us in court. His lawyers kept fighting us in court. And so that case was dismissed. So then when I moved to DC at the end of the just now, we started just doing crazy shit. We were like, okay, gloves are off. We got to do some crazy shit. So we started to do these protests outside the National Archives, which is a national monument, which means it's public property, right?
Right. Yeah, I know. I've been there.
Oh, so you know how they have those huge banners that are down in the front? So we brought in a team of like mountain climbers, like you would have been great on the team.
Yeah.
We scaled the fucking thing and brought those banners down and put up our own banners. And then 30 of us were detained and 7 of us were arrested. And we had this whole Dune thing too. The sisterhood of Dune, the new iteration.
Yeah.
We had all these banners. Da, da, da. So one of our members that was arrested that day is still being prosecuted and being charged with it's the most ridiculous charges. First of all, it's public property, so you can't be trespassing. It's outside. Second of all, there was no theft because we removed their banners very carefully. We placed our banner up, and within an hour, their banner was back up. So both charges are ridiculous, but nonetheless, they're trying to make an example of him. His name is Adam Eidinger, and it's because he is a well-known activist who has been arrested before for other things. He got marijuana legalized in Washington, D.C. He did this thing for ranked voting. He protested against Monsanto, all kinds of stuff that he's done. So they want to make an example of him, and it's a political prosecution.
That's too bad. He seems like he's championing all the right things.
He isn't. His daughter was with him. She's a young woman, just turned 18, and they were both arrested. She was released eventually, but he is being targeted. So that we go to trial with that in October.
Oh my God, 10 months after the fact.
He hasn't been in jail the whole time.
Yeah.
But still.
Having that hang over you, though.
It's very stressful. So we need people to stand with us outside the court in DC when that time comes, and show support for a straight white man supporting women's rights and his daughter's rights. And,
It's not a big ask, is it?
doesn't seem like it, but it turns out that it is.
And it's all because there's just too much money wrapped up in this inequality.
Yeah. Also, according to our lawyer, porn is a very big money maker.
Huge, yeah.
And so porn benefits from women's inequality for many reasons. But one is that a lot of the violence that you see in porn lately would be illegal. Because let's say you say, well, it's sex between consenting adults. There are laws that say you can't consent to torture. You can't consent to being murdered. You can't consent to some of these things. So it might put a crimp in the style of the porn industry, and that's and the human trafficking industry. They're both very big black market industries, but there are a lot of folks in those industries that that you don't know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, did you know? So, for example, there's a few major pornography sites. I just read an article about this like a year or two ago. There's like 5 or 6 really big pornography sites globally, and they're all owned by one company in Montreal, Canada.
What?
Yeah, and the company in Canada doesn't have like a pornographic name. It has like a computer systems technology kind of company. It's a publicly listed company, and they run Pornhub, which is I think the biggest, and then a few others along well, and they're all run by that one company out of Montreal, Canada. And it's like Canada's big deep dark secret that no one really knows that because everyone thinks these companies are American,
Yeah.
but they're not.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's wild. That's like, because yeah, Montreal has always been a big hub for that kind of stuff.
Really?
Hmm.
Gosh, they really did a great job with their PR.
Yeah.
I would think any country except Canada.
Yeah, so there's actually oh, the reason I know that actually is because there's a documentary on Netflix called Pornhub or something like that because they were talking about people trafficking and the porn industry in general, and there were early cases of some of these websites that were publishing rape videos and stuff like that. So it was they were getting into that they were getting into that industry through that angle. So they were talking about all that, which is obviously a massive problem. But then eventually it came out like who these companies are and actually how you get a video taken down or deleted or removed and who you have to go through and how many hoops you have to jump through and how hard it is to find out who's actually in charge because they're all like faceless companies that just make billions of dollars a year, peddling flesh basically.
And that's so like the lawyer says, we're up against so much capital,
Mhm.
above board capital and underground capital, that's essentially why this hasn't happened in over 100 years, because it will have major impact on all of those.
But the longer it goes on, the more capital will be tied up in it because the more money these industries keep making. So like if you don't do it this year, the number of money lost by by creating inequality, which shouldn't be money lost, it should be money gained because you're making, you know, American citizens equal with each other. Like there shouldn't be a value put on that, right? Like that should be something beyond a monetary value. But every year that it goes on, these businesses get bigger and stronger and more financially powerful. And you're just every year it's going to be more difficult.
Absolutely. And the other thing people don't realize is that women, when they make more money, they spend it in their local economies. They buy food, they buy diapers, they buy whatever they're buying. They don't take it to the Cayman Islands.
Mhm.
So it actually benefits all of these companies for women to have more money to spend.
Mhm. It's interesting. I've got a theory. I want to run this by you. So I was chatting a couple months ago here in the studio with someone about gun rights. Okay. And I love target shooting. So I started target shooting actually during COVID. And I love it. You get a big rifle sight, managing your breath, squeezing the trigger, and you're in a safe environment. It was really great. I don't own a gun or anything like that, but I find target shooting incredibly relaxing and peaceful. And I love it. And then I was talking to another guy. He owns a lot of guns. He's a big gun guy. He goes to gun shows. He loves learning about what's new, all this kind of stuff. And and we were chatting about like how to control the gun community and the gun economy in the United States. And he was joking, well, we need better background checks and you got to be able to stop, people buying weapons at these events where they don't have to go through all the background checks. And he had all these ideas. And I was like, you want to know the fastest way to do it is just get like one of these 90-year-old billionaires out there, like let's say Warren Buffett, because he was in the news recently because he's retiring from his role at Berkshire Hathaway. Like, what if Warren Buffett just took like 5% of his net worth and bought all the gun companies in the United States and then said, "We're only gonna sell to shops that do A, B, C, and D," and and change the gun system instead of waiting for the federal government to make the changes, have one of these really wealthy entrepreneurs, come in and change it from inside. And because I think most people realize what changes need to be made, and the government is hamstrung itself because of public interest and the NRA and all these other things. So they're paralyzed to make a change. But you have all these high net worth individuals out there that could come in and buy up basically an entire industry and make it safe. And you would take advice from the government, you would take advice from the private sector, take advice from the NRA, make sure everyone's included in the conversation, and then totally redesign that industry for the betterment of the American people. The same thing could be done for porn. Like you could take a Mackenzie Bezos, the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, who had a divorce settlement of like $30 billion or something, and she's just been giving the money away. She gave over like $20 billion away in 2.5 years or something like that, which is a lot. But she could have bought the company that owns Pornhub, and she could have changed it all from the inside, right? Like at what stage are people with a lot of money gonna maybe stop giving it to charities and maybe start buying all these companies that are made up in these industries and trying to change it or build equality in those industries or make it better for make it serve the American people instead of harm the American people? Like, I think so I was having this conversation with this other person saying like these billionaires out there, like they can do that. Like they have the financial power to do that. And it won't be a charity. Like that industry will continue to make money and pay them back or pay into their foundations or whatever. But they would have the chance to buy it and totally change it from the inside out. Because the government at this stage, I think, on all situations is pretty inept.
The only thing about that is that our major the thing that we make the most money on is weapons. That's what the American government makes.
And sells abroad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would just make more guns.
Yeah, and like maybe not, if Warren Buffett bought the 10 companies in the United States that makes weapons, you know, and maybe the contracts with the US government wouldn't change, so therefore the US military and their business, and they're selling weapons internationally, that wouldn't change because obviously that would ruffle a lot of government feathers. But the way that those companies deal with, you know, Joe and Mary public, like you and me, the way that they would change, and maybe even create a national gun registry or, a national mental health registry where, you can't just go over to the next state if you have psychiatric problems and buy a gun because you went across a state line, like, and that happens. So I'm just wondering, like,
I think that's a good idea. I just don't know how billionaires think, but that's not really how they tend to think.
no, it's not. But that could be more public good than maybe that's maybe a really positive way to put some public good back into the world. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah. Who knows what's going on in these people's minds?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the times, I don't know billionaires, but I do know very rich people. And sometimes they're looking for influence. So if they can give to this one and that one and have their feet in a number of areas,
Yeah.
that gives them a great deal of influence, and these people owe them favors and so on and so forth.
Yeah. But buying all the guns would give you a lot of influence.
Yeah. See, I think that you would buy all the guns and just destroy them all.
Yeah, but there's still military, like there's still legitimate uses for government, like weapon production. Like there still are,
I don't know. I
maybe
mean, I'd like to see no weapons at all.
in an ideal world, I think that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
But I think the men will keep ruining it for generations to come.
Yeah. Imagine if we just got rid of all of them. Like you can, throw a rock at someone's head if you're really mad.
Yeah, but then it's like, well, what do you do? And what do you do when the next Putin shows up or the next Kim Jong-un?
Only have a rock too.
Yeah, and then
And then the woman in charge will be like, Putin, just go back to your room.
there you go, right?
You're really, no video games for you today.
Yeah, or no starting wars with neighbors.
No Pornhub for a month.
That'd be pretty epic. So, like, do you see, like, where are you heading for the next decade of your life? Like, are you gonna stay with activism and try to continue to change politics, or is that becoming just a never winning like game? I mean, like, where are you with your stamina in dealing with people in Washington D.C. versus being creative here in Hollywood and working in your chosen field?
So I am focused on writing and creating projects that are, for film and television. Right now, I'm working on a pilot that I want to shoot about. It's kind of about Hollywood and DC because they're very connected. Um, it's kind of like Veep, like very, very satirical.
That was a great show. Yeah. JDL's the best. Or JLD. Julie Louis-Dreyfus. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
so good. So, yeah, I'm working on various things like that, films and so forth, but I do think that I'm going to have to, because we've gotten so far along with this Equal Rights Amendment, and it is so important just really for people to for women to be equal. It's not a big deal. It shouldn't be a big deal, and it has to happen. So, um as far as having the stamina, I don't have. I'm exhausted. I honestly just wanna go to India and lay on the beach, and
Which would be nice.
that's what I really wanna do. But, um, it's the journey, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if it's gonna work out. I don't know if I'm gonna get there, because every time I get there, the there changes.
Yeah, I mean, you could imagine that the next president of the United States, in 2029 could be a woman, right?
Well, one would fucking hope so.
But
I mean, really.
but then you'd have to imagine that the politics in DC is so toxic and the system is so fucked up that you probably couldn't even pass your equality bill if there was a female president.
No, because a lot of them are horrible. Like a lot of the women have sort of taken on the role modeling from the worst of the men.
And all the lobbyists and stuff like that are all men, and all the companies are run by men, and they're the ones pulling all the strings in DC anyway. So you'd still be you'd still be coming at it from a challenged position, even if whoever's sitting in the Oval Office was male or female,
Absolutely.
because the system's fucked.
That's it.
Yeah.
But it's got to be the power of the people. So we have to educate, we have to tell people what's going on so that they can be like I was at the Smithsonian, like, what? You know? Because if enough people know about it and go, well, that doesn't seem right, then the politicians have to follow because they can't go against all the votes.
What's the news media been like for your cause? I mean, have you?
Terrible, terrible.
Yeah, because that's how people get educated, right?
They don't want to cover it. Not even the Rachel Maddow show. No, nobody wants to cover it. Lawrence O'Donnell covered us twice, which was very nice. Um, I think what was that lady? The one that got fired, the black woman that got fired, covered us once. But no, it's almost impossible to get media coverage for this issue.
The future has to be podcasts, right? Just long form conversations like this where you can get the word out, where you're not being edited and you're not being co-opted by other avenues or other dark money.
Yeah, I was thinking I have to like make a list of podcasts and try and convince them to bring me on so I could talk about it.
You need a PR person if you can hire them, because like this is what PR people do now. They just have a list of like 1,000 podcasts, and they just create like a nice one page for you as a guest and tell people what you do, and then they just blast that out to like 1,000 podcast hosts, and then they just wait for the replies to come back, and then they book you because I'm on that list. So I get emails every day of PR people who are like, would you like to interview my client? They're a writer and they're putting out this new book next month, and they've also written this screenplay, and they're in LA for a week and they'd love to join you. Like, but there are PR people that just do like this, and I can introduce you to a bunch if you'd like. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because doing it on your own is hard, because they actually package it quite well and they introduce you, and obviously I've done this quite a bit, and I have a relationship with some of them, and I know that they're going to send me interesting people that like to talk and stuff like that. So that's the best way to do it, because it might be like a retainer for 12 months or something like that, but they will get you out for sure.
I think I need to do that, and maybe I do it with the lawyer. Um, I don't know because you want it to be kind of casual, I suppose. No. But the lawyer, our lawyer is so smart about this and about what we have to do to get it done. I think it would be a good good thing.
Well, you're a great spokesperson for it, because you had like a very you still have a very successful career in Hollywood, and you took time away to deal with this massive inequality, that exists in this country. And I think that that's a really nice story, because you could have just kept being a successful actress, and not taken up that challenge. And I think that's as much a story as anything. Like, it makes you a very good spokesperson for the organization, right? If you start bringing on lawyers and talking too much about legal this and legal that, you might put people to sleep. But the way you present it, you're a professional presenter. Like, you read you act out other people's words, and you speak other people's words, and, like, you're an orator, right? Like, you can get messages out. And I think that in itself is way more valuable, as a spokesperson who's used to speaking and who's done theater and this kind of stuff. Like, it kind of plays to a lot of your strengths beyond just being a woman, and also caring massively about the cause that you're fighting for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much do they charge these people?
I don't know. I can introduce you to some by email, and let you kind of. I can tell you offline too, like, what I think some of them might get. But it's pretty reasonable, and they get you a lot of exposure. And also too, like, there'll be a mix between, like, in-person podcasts like mine, and then remote Zoom ones, because there's a lot of really popular podcast hosts that just do Zooms all around the world, and
Just so easy.
which is so easy. Yeah. And I've always not liked the quality as much, and I always want to, like, sit across from someone and really meet someone. So that's why I've kind of chosen this format.
It's very different.
Yeah. But it's wonderful. Like, a couple months ago, or almost a year ago now, I had a friend come here, and we talked for 3 hours on the podcast, and we went, we had, like, kind of a long history. We wanted to talk about all the touch points we've had over the years with each other and stuff like that. And it was like a 3.5 hour conversation. We just let the whole thing roll, and it was a lot of fun. But he came out of it, like, euphoric. Like, he was like, I don't think I've just talked with someone for 3 hours in years.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't remember the last time I went 3 hours without looking at my phone. Like, and he's just like, this human to human contact, it's like a drug. And I was like, well, yeah, like, that's the way we all used to live before COVID. And now we've all just gotten used to staying at home and never going out anymore.
Yeah.
And it's killing us, like, slowly.
Yes, it is.
And
That's so interesting. When we went to the Yale class reunion, we went to this lecture called The Science of Happiness, and this psychology professor there who has done all this research. You can actually do the course for free on Coursera. It's called, in that case, it's called The Science of Well-Being. It's a Yale College class. Basically, she says that if you socialize with people in person, your happiness goes way up and it stays up. She has all these really interesting things. Like, for instance, they did a study and they gave half the people were supposed to. They asked the people, okay, we're going to put you on the L train, um, and you have a choice to speak to a stranger or not speak to a stranger. And everybody's like, I don't want to speak to a stranger. And they're like, okay, well, half of you are going to, if the other half of you are not. And then they studied them afterwards. The ones that struck up conversations with other human beings that they didn't know from Adam were so much happier, and they stayed happier for a long period of time
mm-hmm.
than the people that just kept to themselves. They said that human beings need to be social. They need to be with other people. They need to, another thing that they had them do was just write a letter to, let's say, your spouse or your neighbor or somebody, just a short letter saying how much you appreciate them and how grateful you are for whatever you're grateful for vis-a-vis them, and then take it over to them, hand it to them, and they read it, or you read it to them. People that did that got what they call the happiness bump for 6 months
6 months. Wow.
from doing that one thing.
Well,
And it had started because at Yale, 1 out of 10 students were suicidal by the amount of stress and overwhelm and lack of sleep and just pushing and pushing through, doing. So she devised, and it's really worthwhile taking this class, and it's free, to really, take back our mental health and and COVID did not help at all because it just made everybody retreat and stay in front of their TVs and wear sweatpants for 4 years. So we've got to get back out there. We've got to start socializing. I was thinking of starting a monthly salon at our home
Mhm.
just to invite people to come over and hang out and just, sit around and talk,
Yeah, with no agenda, right? And just let everyone just talk about whatever's going on in their lives. It's a beautiful thing to do.
right?
Yeah,
Okay. If
I
I
like it.
do, and then you should do one, and then each week we would have a different place to go to.
That'd be nice. Yeah, like a little bit of an old style speakeasy where we talk about, the world and what's going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
It's interesting, because I was doing some research the other day. I was sitting around, I was a little bored, and of course I've only lived in the United States for 18 months. So I've been very surprised with how legal some drugs are in the United States and also how illegal some drugs are in the United States and how there's a very fine line with that, right? So I started doing some research about like so what states, has legal marijuana and which states don't have legal marijuana. And not every state in the United States has a legal marijuana, right? And I started doing a bit of a deep dive, and I started realizing that some states have not legalized marijuana, not because marijuana is quote unquote dangerous, but they keep it classified as dangerous because the states that legalize marijuana, alcohol sales go down, tobacco sales go down, therapist hours go down, and depressant pharmaceutical subscriptions go down. So so instead of gi so instead of giving people legal marijuana, they wanna keep people in therapy, keep people on antidepressants, keep people drinking, and all of that because those all
Make
bring in
more
revenue.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not about making something legal or something illegal. It's about rotating revenue from one ecosystem of the economy into another. And the other people might be like a startup, like all the cannabis businesses that have grown out of the California system only because we live here and we see it every day. Whereas, the established therapists and pharmaceuticals might take a hit. And then of course they might be donating to your political campaign, and you can't
Right.
you can't have that. So it's so interesting to see like how the politics of even just legalizing drugs that everyone uses and are basically considered to be not that lethal, and just the politics around legalizing that is unbelievable.
And also the cover up on antidepressants is pretty rude duty.
Yeah.
Like, I remember hearing something like 1 out of 3 Americans was on an antidepressant. I
I
don't
think
know.
I think it's like 1 out of 2 women in the United States are on some kind of antidepressants. That's massive. I don't know what the men. I mean, men probably drink more and maybe do more hard drugs or whatever, and women might choose pharmaceuticals. I don't know, but there's equal mental health problems on both sides of that coin. It's just like what they decide to use to medicate.
And, I mean, this is so controversial, but I'm even I'm even loath to say it, but from what I understand, there has not been a mass shooting event
Hmm.
where the individual has not either been on antidepressants or recently cold turkeyed their antidepressants. And I don't think anybody wants to really look into that because it's so much money.
Big pharma, yeah, you can't go against big pharma, and they own all the television stations because they own all the ad share, right?
All the
Yeah,
ads.
all of them.
AstraZeneca will pay for your prescription.
Yeah,
I don't know
CNN
why.
CNN is all pharmaceutical ads. It's funny, like, CNN, is basically owned by Pfizer and AstraZeneca. They run all the ads, and then it was like 3 months ago, CNN declared the Pfizer CEO the CEO of the year and, like, CNN's top, CEO award for 2025 or something. They awarded it to the Pfizer. I was like, "Of course you awarded it to Pfizer. They're the ones sponsoring the whole system." It's chaos.
It's disgraceful.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. It's like all this big money. It corrupted Washington first, and now it's in New York doing the ad sales round, and it's just gonna keep going.
And look at what's happening in Hollywood with the way that they are sort of kowtowing now to this administration paying. Look at what happened at 60 Minutes. Did you see that?
I heard about it. Yeah, about how.
So the guy quit. They're like being told what they can and cannot say.
Yeah.
And they're basically like okay with it.
Mhm. 'Cause they can go out and podcast and just tell the truth and make probably more money. Like, like there's enough Americans now that are so tired of turning on the TV and being lied to that they'd rather turn on to something like this. And that's why and they can watch like independent journalism on YouTube is amazing.
Yeah.
And there's people that used to work for major journalism outlets who got tired of it and are now, and you don't have to like the person. Like, so take Tucker Carlson, for example. Like, I do not like Tucker Carlson. Like, and I don't care about his religion. I don't care about his politics. But when I sit and watch him, I don't like him. Like, it's just something about him, right? And a lot of people feel like me, and a lot of people love him, and that's fine too. And you don't have to like him or hate him, but you have to respect what he's doing. So he quit Fox, started up his own thing, and now he talks to absolutely all kinds of people that he would never get to talk to on Fox. And he has his own podcast TV show and he interviews people. And he's doing a really good job and he's trying his best. And I really appreciate his passion for independent journalism. I really respect his diligence for going out on his own and making it happen. I don't like him as a person, but I think the people he's talking to are people that Americans need to know their stories. And he's actually doing a great public service actually by doing his work independently instead of kind of being co-opted by legacy media or something like that. But it's great to see, and I think more people are going to start doing that. And there's already a huge rush of people doing that. But people just don't want to be lied to. And people who sit down and watch us, we've been talking for 2 hours and 20 minutes. Like there's nowhere to hide. Like you are who you are, and people who have been watching will know exactly who you are, where you came from, what you did, how you feel about certain topics. We're not going to edit anything. And people are craving these kinds of outlets where they're just not going to get, where their message isn't going to get misstrued. No,
But how do you find it? That's what I don't understand.
that's the tough one is breaking through the noise, right? Having other people retweet or post your things in various places, getting some PR around it about, getting high profile guests is the number one way to do it, right? But there's when a high profile person comes to LA, they're here for 2 or 3 days. Like they're not going to do 30 podcasts. They're going to do 1 or 2, right? So they tend to go to the same people, the people who have the most subscribers, the people who have the most audience. But there's millions of people who are out there trying to break through or try to get their message out. So it's an interesting game to play. But I just think if you keep putting out good conversations and you keep treating your guests with respect and you keep trying to get to the core of who your guest is and what makes them tick and what kind of things are important to them, then you'll find your own audience. Yeah. Takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a blast. You get to meet so many people. Like that's the reason I started the whole podcast is because I didn't know anyone when I moved to LA. Yeah. And you're number 144 on my, so I've made like 100, some people have come twice, but I've made like 144 new friends.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We have to invite all of them to the salon.
We have to, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
A
Probably only like
thinking
30 will show up, but still.
could be nice.
Yeah.
Could be
I
nice.
think we have to do that. Let's promise we're going to do.
I think it'd be good. A good
We
place.
have a very nice place to have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got a good hosting pad?
Yeah. Yeah. It's got outdoors and indoors.
Okay. Well, we'll have to sort that out offline. See if we can make it happen. Because I think this town is in need of a few places to like where people can go once a week or once a month and share common ideas and kind of get together and talk about all the issues going on in our industry here, but then also the wider industries going on in the United States and the issue you're fighting for as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could be great.
Okay. I'm excited.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we head out? Because we're kind of pushing the upward limits here. I mean, how do you feel about our chat?
I feel great. I just wish that people would watch the movie Equal Means Equal. And I wish that people would go to our website, equalmeansequal.org, and sign up for our newsletter or just read stuff in our news section.
And I'll put all these links in the description and stuff like that.
Thank you.
No worries.
Because, you're a very educated, very proactive person, and you had no idea that women were not equal. I as well.
I knew that women were not treated as equal.
But you didn't know they were literally unequal by law.
That's the bit that fucked me over, yeah.
Yeah.
I was totally surprised by that.
It's very shocking.
Yeah.
And I think it's, if we can get that out there more, I think my job would be really much easier.
1.7 trillion a year just in federal employee costs based on that inequality gap, huh?
Yep.
And that's why you keep getting stonewalled in D.C.
Absolutely.
No one wants to foot that bill.
No.
Status quo all the way.
And the corporations are underwriting, as you said, they're behind it, and they paying women so much less. So it's not any, it's a gazillion, jillions or whatever.
But I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if you don't know, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think the federal government is the largest employer in the United States.
It would make sense that they, if not, that they would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they still are. I think like Amazon has like 300,000 employees. And I think they might be number 2 or number 3 or maybe Walmart or something like that. But I think the U.S. government, federal government, is still the largest employer in the United States. So it makes sense that if there is inequalities that would cost them $1.7 trillion to fix, they would probably want to ignore that as long as possible.
And Walmart is a big part of our film because we, the women launched a class action lawsuit against Walmart, and it was really obvious how Walmart was discriminating against women in terms of pay and promotion, but they lost the case. You know why? They said the case was just too big, involved just too many people.
Really?
Yeah.
Which is bullshit because they just did an opioid crisis lawsuit against all the opioid makers, and they had like hundreds of thousands of people involved in that lawsuit, and there was billions of dollars available for victims and victims' families, and people like Johnson & Johnson and all these big companies that were all making opioids, they all paid.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, Walmart did not. And part of it may have been because their lawyers were very connected to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court were the ones that said, we're not even going to discuss the discrimination because you have truckloads of evidence that Walmart was discriminating against women. We're just going to say that it's just too many people, too many complaints, too many different things. We're just scrapping the whole thing.
So they threw it out because you had too much good evidence.
Yep.
That doesn't make any sense.
No. That's
Well-
what we're dealing with.
Well, I wish you the best of luck in your DC adventures because that
Thank
cannot be. Which do you prefer most? Do you prefer going up to Washington DC and trying to convince people that women deserve federal law in equality? No. So which do you prefer better? Do you prefer going up to DC and trying to convince lawmakers that women should be equal to men under the eyes of the law? Or do you prefer being in LA trying to get people to finance your scripts or finance your projects? Which of those universes do you like better?
I think LA is much better
Yeah.
because
Both seem really tough.
they're both really tough, but in DC, they will literally lie to your face. In LA, they'll just not be interested or be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. But in DC, they'll be like, oh my God, Kamala, you are right. This is terrible.
And then crickets. Fuck. What a bunch of bastards. All right. Well, that's well, look, hey, I'm really glad you came in today. That was really I hope we can do this again. Maybe we can talk more about your acting career because I think we got sidetracked into your political activism and stuff like that. But I think coming back and chat about your acting career would just be wonderful. And of course, please come back if there's anything that changes on the equal means equal front.
Okay,
Yeah.
absolutely. It would be my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I really had a great time.
I had a great time too. So now we can go here just to show people we're in the same room so people can see. Wonderful to meet you. I look forward to staying in touch.
Okay.
And good luck with your fight.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're out. Done.